Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome to a journey that's going to take you from the deepest heartbreak to the most triumphant love. I'm here to guide you through Kira's story, a tale of rejection, exile, and the incredible strength it takes to rebuild your world when everything you believed in crumbles beneath your feet. Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath you? That moment when the person you trusted most, the one your soul recognized as home, looks you in the eye and destroys everything with a single word? That's where we begin tonight. With rejection. With pain so raw it threatens to tear apart not just a heart, but the very fabric of destiny itself. But here's what I promise you. This isn't just a story about falling. This is about rising. About discovering that sometimes the universe breaks us open not to destroy us, but to make room for something infinitely more beautiful. So settle in. Let your heart open, and prepare for a love story that will remind you that second chances aren't just possible. Sometimes they're the greatest gift the moon goddess can give. Chapter 1. The ancient oak's bark bit into my palms as I pressed against it, desperate for something solid to anchor me as my world dissolved. 3 moons had passed since the claiming ceremony, 3 moons since I'd felt the mate bond snap into place like a golden thread connecting my soul to Damon Blackthorn's. 3 moons of believing I was the luckiest she-wolf alive. How naive I'd been. You can't be serious. My voice came out smaller than I intended, barely audible over the rustling leaves above us. The sacred grove of the Silver Moon Pack stretched around us, ancient trees that had witnessed countless mate bonds form and strengthen over the centuries. Tonight, they would witness one shatter. Damon stood 10 feet away, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his ceremonial leathers. Even now, even as he prepared to destroy me, my wolf whimpered with longing. The mate bond pulled at my chest, a constant ache that had only grown stronger since our claiming. His scent of cedar and winter storms still made my knees weak, still called to every primal instinct I possessed. But his ice-blue eyes held no warmth, no recognition of what we'd shared. I've never been more serious, Kira. His voice was the same one that had whispered my name in the darkness, that had promised forever against my skin. Now it cut like silver. The council has spoken. You are not fit to be the Alpha's mate. The council? Of course. I should have known his grandmother, the iron matriarch Lydia Blackthorn, would find a way to tear us apart. She'd made her disapproval clear from the moment Damon announced our bond. A lowly beta's daughter was hardly worthy of the most powerful alpha bloodline in the Northern Territories. The moon goddess herself chose us, I whispered, my hand instinctively moving to the place over my heart where the bond burned brightest. You felt it too, Damon. In the ceremony, when the silver light surrounded us. What I felt was a mistake. Each word landed like a physical blow. The council's genealogists have discovered irregularities in your bloodline. Your grandmother wasn't the pure beta blood we believed. There's something else, something that makes our union impossible. Something cold and sharp twisted in my stomach. What are you talking about? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Rogue blood, Kira. Your grandmother was cast out from her original pack for a reason. That taint flows through your veins, makes you unfit to carry on the Blackthorn legacy. The grove spun around me. My grandmother Elena had died when I was young, but my mother had always spoken of her with such reverence, such love. A respected healer, a wise woman who'd helped birth half the pack's current generation. That's impossible. But even as I said it, memories surfaced. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The way older pack members sometimes looked at me with something like pity, my mother's fierce protectiveness that had always seemed excessive for a simple beta family. The bloodline records don't lie. Damon's jaw clenched, and for a moment I caught something raw in his expression before it shuttered again. The council has voted. Our bond must be severed. You're going to let them decide for you? The question tore from my throat. You're the Alpha, Damon. Your word is law. My word serves the pack. But his hands trembled slightly at his sides. And the pack cannot be led by a tainted bloodline. Tainted. The word hit me like a slap. I'd grown up believing I might not be the strongest or the most beautiful wolf in the pack, but I was pure,
Clean. Worthy.
now, even that was being stripped away. The mate bond pulsed between us, and I saw him flinch. He felt it too, this agony, this tearing sensation like someone was slowly pulling apart our souls with silver wire. But he stood firm, unmovable as the mountains that bordered our territory. "There's more." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You're to leave the territory. Tonight." The grove fell silent except for the thundering of my own heartbeat. Leave. Exile. Immediate and permanent. He could meet my eyes. "If you're found on Silvermoon land after sunrise, you'll be treated as a hostile rogue." Exile. The worst punishment our kind could face, short of death. To be cut off from pack, from family, from everything that made life worth living. Wolves weren't meant to be alone. We were creatures of community, of belonging. Without a pack, most rogues went mad within a year. My parents will not be permitted contact. My position as pack healer revoked. Each word was another nail in the coffin of my old life. I stared at this man I'd loved, had planned to build a future with, and tried to find any trace of the daemon who'd held me through the long nights, who'd traced my scars with gentle fingers and sworn they were marks of strength, not shame. "I could challenge this," I said quietly. "Call for a council vote. Demand to see these bloodline records myself." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope? Fear? "You could. But you don't want me to." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. In the distance, I could hear the pack's evening hunt beginning, the mournful howls that had once been home calling me to join them. "Tonight, for the last time. The records are sealed by blood magic," he said finally. "Only direct descendants of the founding families can access them. Then unseal them." "I can't." The words came out strangled. "Kira, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder? I wanted to laugh, but I was afraid if I started, I'd never stop. How could this possibly be harder? My mate was rejecting me, exiling me, destroying every dream I'd ever dared to hold. But as I looked at him, really looked, I saw something I'd missed before. The tight lines around his eyes, the way his jaw kept clenching and unclenching, the slight tremor in his hands that he couldn't quite control. He was in pain too. The realization should have comforted me, should have given me hope that this was all some terrible mistake we could work through together. Instead, it made everything worse. Because if he was suffering as much as I was, if the mate bond was tearing him apart from the inside just like it was me, and he was still going through with this, then there really was no hope. "I need my things," I managed. "Already packed. Marcus will bring them to the border." Of course. They'd planned this down to the last detail, while I'd been preparing for what I thought would be a quiet evening with my mate. While I'd been braiding wildflowers into my hair and choosing my prettiest dress, they'd been orchestrating my destruction. I pushed off from the oak, my legs shaky, but holding. Pride was all I had left, and I'd be damned if I'd let them take that too. "I want you to know something, Damon Blackthorn." I met his eyes, held his gaze even though it felt like staring into the sun. "I would have died for this pack. I would have bled for it, sacrificed everything for it. But most of all, I would have loved you with everything I had, tainted blood and all." His face crumpled for just an instant before that mask of cold indifference slammed back into place. "That's exactly why you have to go." The words were so soft I almost missed them. But they hit me like a physical blow, because suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about bloodlines or council politics. He was afraid. Afraid of what loving me might cost him. Afraid of choosing his heart over his duty. Afraid of being alpha and human at the same time. The realization should have made me fight harder, should have made me refuse to go. But instead, it filled me with a bone-deep weariness that made my limbs feel like lead. "Goodbye, Damon." I turned and walked away before he could see the tears start to fall. Each step felt like dying, the mate bond stretching and straining with distance. By the time I reached the grove's edge, I was gasping with the pain of it. Behind me, I heard a sound like a wounded animal, raw and broken, and full of anguish. But when I looked back, the grove was empty. At the territorial border, Marcus waited with my belongings, 2 bags that somehow contained the remnants of a life I'd spent 24 years building. His usual easy smile was nowhere to be found. "I'm sorry, Kira," he said quietly, and I could tell he meant it. "This is wrong." But not wrong enough to stop it. He flinched, but didn't argue. I took the bags and stepped across the invisible line that marked the end of everything I'd ever known. The moment my feet touched unclaimed territory, the pack bond that had connected me to hundreds of souls since birth simply disappeared. The silence in my head was deafening. I made it exactly 50 yards before I collapsed to my knees and screamed, a sound of pure grief that echoed through the mountains and sent night birds fleeing from their roosts. It was the sound of a heart breaking, of a future crumbling, of a wolf learning what it meant to truly be alone. When the echoes finally died, I wiped my face and stood. The moon hung full and silver above me, the same moon that had blessed my union with Damon just 3 short months ago. Now she seemed to be mocking me. But as I shouldered my bags and turned my back on the only home I'd ever known, I made myself a promise. I would survive this. I would find a way to live without pack, without mate, without the bonds that made most wolves whole. And someday I would return. Not as the broken, exiled she-wolf limping into the darkness, but as something new, something stronger, something they would never see coming. The mountain path stretched before me, leading into unknown territory and an uncertain future. Behind me, the silver moon packlands glowed silver in the moonlight, beautiful and untouchable as a dream. I didn't look back again. Chapter 2. 3 days without food. 2 days without proper sleep. And approximately 47 hours since I'd last felt truly warm. I pressed deeper into the hollow of the massive pine tree, pulling my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders. The early autumn nights in the unclaimed territories were brutal, nothing like the cozy den I'd shared with my parents in the heart of Silver Moon lands. Here, every shadow could hide a threat, every sound could signal danger. My wolf paced restlessly beneath my skin, agitated by our isolation. She didn't understand why we weren't running back to the pack, why we were ignoring every instinct that screamed at us to return to safety. I tried to explain it to her, about exile, about rejection, about the fact that home was no longer home. But wolves lived in the present, and in the present, we were cold, hungry, and utterly alone. The mate bond still burned in my chest like a constant ember of pain. Distance hadn't dulled it the way I'd hoped. If anything, being cut off from Damon's presence made the ache more pronounced, like a phantom limb that throbbed where it used to be whole. I could feel him sometimes, late at night when the barriers between sleeping and waking grew thin. Feel his restlessness, his own pain echoing mine. Part of me wondered if he was suffering as much as I was. The larger part reminded me that if he truly was, he would have found a way to keep me. A branch snapped in the darkness beyond my hiding spot. I froze, every muscle tensing, as I strained to listen. The forest around me had been unusually quiet tonight. No owl calls, no rustle of small prey moving through the underbrush. Even the insects seemed to have gone silent. That was never a good sign. Another snap, closer this time. Definitely not a deer or a rabbit. The footsteps were too measured, too careful.
Human.
Or worse, shifter. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed further back into the hollow.
Rogues.
Had to be. The unclaimed territories were crawling with them, wolves who'd been exiled like me, or who'd chosen to leave their packs for darker reasons. Most were harmless, just broken souls trying to survive. But some went mad from the isolation. And mad rogues were the most dangerous predators in our world. "I can smell you, little wolf." The voice drifted through the trees, male and rough with disuse. My blood turned to ice. He was close, maybe 20 yards away and getting closer. No point hiding now. Come out, wherever you are." I bit back a whimper as my wolf urged me to shift, to run. But I couldn't outrun a rogue on his own territory, especially not in my weakened state. My only chance was to stay hidden and pray he moved on. The footsteps stopped directly in front of my tree. "There's a good girl. I know you're in there." A hand shot into the hollow, fingers grasping for me. I jerked back, but there wasn't enough space. His fingernails, more like claws, raked across my arm, tearing through jacket and skin alike. "Got you." I lunged out of the hollow on the opposite side, rolling across the forest floor and coming up in a crouch. The rogue stood between me and my meager belongings, grinning with too many teeth. His eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and his scent hit me like a physical blow: sour sweat, old blood, and the distinctive reek of madness. "Pretty little thing," he crooned, stalking toward me with predatory grace. Been so long since I had company. Been so long since I had entertainment. The way he said that last word made my skin crawl. I backed away, keeping my movements slow and non-threatening even as my mind raced for options. He was bigger than me, stronger, and clearly unhinged. But he was also overconfident. "I don't want any trouble," I said, raising my hands in what I hoped was a peaceful gesture. "I'm just passing through." "Oh, but I want trouble." His grin widened. "I want all kinds of trouble with you, sweet thing. The kind of trouble that'll keep me warm for weeks." He lunged. I dove to the side, but he was faster than his shambling gait had suggested. His claws caught my shoulder, spinning me around and sending me crashing into another tree. Pain exploded through my back as rough bark scraped away skin. "Feisty."
I like that.
He was on me again before I could recover, one hand wrapping around my throat while the other tangled in my hair. "Don't worry, little wolf. I'll be gentle at first." Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as his grip tightened. My wolf snarled and clawed beneath my skin, demanding I shift, demanding I fight. But the change took precious seconds I didn't have, and he'd snap my neck before I could complete the transformation. This was it. 3 days of freedom, and I was going to die in the darkness like countless other rogues, my bones left to bleach in the unclaimed lands where no one would ever find them. A low growl rumbled through the forest, not from me, not from my attacker, but from somewhere in the shadows beyond. The rogue's head snapped up, his grip on my throat loosening just enough for me to drag in a desperately needed breath. "Who's there?" he snarled. "This is my territory." Actually, a new voice said, smooth as whiskey and twice as intoxicating, "I think you'll find this entire region belongs to the Nightfall Pack. And we don't appreciate trespassers." A figure stepped into the moonlight, and my breath caught in what was left of my throat. He was tall, taller even than Damon, with broad shoulders that spoke of both wolf and warrior. Dark hair fell in waves to his collar, and even in the dim light, I could see eyes the color of forest shadows. But it was his presence that truly took my breath away. Power rolled off him in waves, the kind of deep, unshakable authority that could only come from an alpha. And not just any alpha. This was old power, ancient bloodlines, the kind of lineage that could trace its roots back to the first wolves who learned to walk on 2 legs. "Nightfall Pack," the rogue spat, but I could hear the fear creeping into his voice. "That's just stories. Legends." "Are we?" The newcomer's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then I suppose you have nothing to worry about." He moved like liquid darkness, crossing the space between them faster than should have been possible for someone in human form. The rogue released me and spun to face this new threat, but he might as well have been fighting the wind. One moment he was standing over me, leering and dangerous. The next, he was pinned against a tree with a stranger's hand wrapped around his throat. "You made 2 mistakes tonight," the dark-haired alpha said conversationally, as if he wasn't currently crushing a man's windpipe. "First, you trespassed on protected land. Second, you touched something that doesn't belong to you." "She's nobody," the rogue wheezed. "Just another exile, another piece of rogue trash." The pressure around his throat increased. "That's where you're wrong. She's under our protection now." "Our protection?" I tried to process that, but my head was spinning from oxygen deprivation and shock. Who was this alpha? What was the Nightfall Pack? And why was he claiming me? "Please," the rogue gasped. "I didn't know." I'll leave. I'll never come back. You're right. You won't. There was a sharp snap, and the rogue's body went limp. The alpha released him, letting the corpse slide down the tree trunk to crumple at his feet. I stared in shock. I'd seen death before, hunting accidents, territory disputes, the occasional challenge fight gone wrong. But this was different. This was swift, efficient, and utterly without remorse. The alpha turned to me, and those shadow-dark eyes seemed to see straight through to my soul. Are you hurt? I opened my mouth to speak, but only a croak came out. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Instead, I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Good. He stepped closer, moving slowly so as not to spook me further. I'm sorry you had to see that. Normally we handle rogue problems more diplomatically, but anyone who would harm a lone female forfeits their right to mercy. This close, I could smell his scent, pine and midnight air, with something wilder underneath. Something that made my wolf lift her head with interest despite everything we'd just been through. But there was no mate bond, no golden thread connecting us. Just a strange sense of rightness that I couldn't explain. My name is Asher, he said, crouching down to my level. Asher Nightfall, alpha of the Nightfall pack. Nightfall. I'd heard whispers of them over the years. Ghost stories, mostly, tales of a pack so old and secretive that most wolves believed they were myth. They supposedly lived deep in the heart of the ancient forests, following traditions that predated modern pack law by centuries. I'm Kira. I managed, my voice still hoarse. Kira Moonwhisper. Former Kira's Moonwhisper, I guess. Former. His head tilted, and I caught a flash of something dangerous in his expression. Exiled. I nodded, suddenly ashamed. What must I look like to this powerful alpha? 3 days of sleeping rough had left me dirty and wild-haired, my clothes torn and stained. I was nobody now, nothing but another rogue to be pitted or eliminated as necessary. But instead of disgust, his expression softened with something that looked almost like understanding. What pack? Silvermoon. The name felt like poison on my tongue. Ah. His jaw tightened. Damon Blackthorn's territory. The way he said Damon's name, with such casual familiarity, sent a chill down my spine. You know him? We've met. The words were carefully neutral, but there was history there. I could hear it in the subtle tension, see it in the way Asher's hands clenched just slightly. What was your crime? Tainted bloodline, apparently. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. My grandmother was allegedly a rogue. Made me unfit to be an alpha's mate. Asher went very still. You were Damon's mate? For about 3 months. Then the council decided I wasn't good enough for the precious Blackthorn legacy. I tried to keep my tone light, casual, but failed miserably. The pain was still too raw, too fresh. And he let them exile you. It wasn't a question. Somehow, this stranger seemed to understand exactly what had happened, the choice Damon had made between duty and love. He chose his pack over me, I said simply. I can't really blame him for that, can't you? Asher's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. A true mate bond is sacred, Kira Moonwhisper. It's not something to be discarded because a council finds it inconvenient. The casual way he spoke about mate bonds made my chest ache. He was right, of course. Everything I'd been taught about our kind said that mates were gifts from the moon goddess herself, bonds that transcended politics and bloodlines. But apparently, some bonds were more sacred than others. It doesn't matter now, I said, struggling to my feet. My legs shook, but I managed to stay upright. That life is over. Is it? He rose as well, towering over me, but somehow not making me feel small. What if I told you it doesn't have to be? I don't understand. The Nightfall Pack is always looking for wolves with unique circumstances. Wolves who've been cast out by their birth packs for reasons that have more to do with politics than character. His smile was enigmatic. We offer something other packs don't, which is a chance to discover who you really are. Not who others think you should be, but who you were meant to be before the world tried to shape you into something smaller. The offer hung in the air between us, like a lifeline. A pack. Belonging again. The end of this crushing isolation that was slowly driving me mad. But I'd learned not to trust beautiful promises from handsome alphas. What's the catch? I asked. His smile widened, showing teeth that were just a little too sharp to be fully human. Smart girl. The catch is that joining the Nightfall Pack means leaving your old life behind completely. No contact with former pack members, no clinging to old loyalties. When you become one of us, you become one of us fully. And if I say no, then I'll have my wolves escort you safely to neutral territory. You'll have supplies, a head start, and our protection until you find somewhere else to settle. He shrugged. But Kira, out there alone, how long do you really think you'll survive? Not long. We both knew it. The encounter with the rogue had proven that beyond doubt. I was strong, but I wasn't strong enough to make it on my own indefinitely. Why? I asked. Why help me? You don't even know me. For a moment, something flickered across his features, too quick to identify, but intense enough to make my wolf stir with interest. Let's just say I have my reasons, he said finally. Reasons that have to do with old debts and older promises. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. He extended his hand. What do you say, Kira Moonwhisper? Ready for a new beginning? I stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that this was another crossroads moment. Another choice that would reshape my entire existence. Behind me lay nothing but wilderness and certain death. Ahead lay the unknown, a mysterious pack, an enigmatic alpha, and promises that might be too good to be true. But what did I have to lose? My old life was already over. My mate had already chosen duty over love. My pack had already cast me out like garbage. Maybe it was time to stop being Kira the exile and start becoming someone new. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were warm and calloused, strong enough to crush bone but gentle as they closed around mine. The moment our skin touched, something electric passed between us. Not a mate bond, but something else. Something that felt like recognition on a level deeper than conscious thought. Welcome to the Nightfall Pack, Kira, he said, and his smile was like sunrise after the longest night of my life. I think you're going to fit in perfectly. As he led me deeper into the forest, toward whatever new life awaited, I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting hadn't been as accidental as it seemed. That somehow, some way, Asher Nightfall had been looking for me specifically. But tired as I was, hurt as I was, I found I didn't care. For the first time in 3 days, I wasn't alone. And for the first time since my exile, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Chapter 3. The Nightfall Pack's territory was nothing like what I'd expected. Instead of the crude camps and makeshift shelters I'd imagined for a pack of legendary outcasts, I found myself standing at the edge of a hidden valley that looked like something out of an ancient fairy tale. Stone buildings rose from the forest floor, their architecture so old it seemed to have grown from the earth itself. Warm golden light spilled from windows carved directly into massive tree trunks, and I could smell wood smoke, roasting meat, and something else, something that made my wolf practically purr with contentment.
Home.
It smelled like home. Welcome to Raven's Hollow, Asher said, his voice filled with quiet pride as we descended the winding path into the valley. Our ancestors built this place over 800 years ago, back when the old ways were still strong. 800 years. I tried to wrap my mind around that kind of history. The Silvermoon Pack considered itself ancient, and we'd only been established for 3 centuries. This place predated every pack structure I knew about. How many wolves live here? I asked, watching as figures moved between the buildings below. Even from this distance, I could sense their power, not the rigid hierarchy of modern packs, but something more fluid, more primal. 43, as of tonight. He glanced at me with that enigmatic smile. 44, now that you're here.
Small, then.
Most packs boasted membership in the hundreds. But as we walked deeper into the settlement, I began to understand why the Nightfall Pack didn't need numbers. The wolves I saw moving through the streets radiated a quiet confidence that spoke of absolute security. This wasn't just a pack, it was a sanctuary. Asher. A woman's voice called out from ahead, warm with affection and relief. Thank the goddess you're back. Alara's been pacing holes in the floor waiting for word. The woman who approached us was stunning in the way that only comes from pure, undiluted wolf blood. Silver hair flowed down her back like moonlight, and her violet eyes held centuries of wisdom. She moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in both human and wolf form, but it was the power rolling off her that made me instinctively drop my gaze. Elder. Not just any elder, but one of the old blood, the kind of wolf who remembered when magic and shape-shifting were one and the same. Kira, meet Luna, Asher said, and I caught the slight emphasis he placed on her title. Luna, this is the wolf I told you about. Luna's piercing gaze swept over me, taking in my torn clothes, my haunted expression, the lingering scent of fear and desperation that still clung to my skin. I braced myself for judgment, for the kind of disdain I'd grown used to receiving from pack leadership. Instead, her expression softened with something that looked remarkably like compassion. Oh, child, she murmured, reaching out to cup my face with hands that felt impossibly warm. What they've done to you. The cruelty, the waste of it. To my mortification, tears sprang to my eyes at the first truly gentle touch I'd received in days. I tried to pull back, but Luna's grip was firm. You're safe now, she said, and there was something in her voice that made it feel less like a promise and more like a fundamental law of the universe. No one will hurt you here. No one will cast you aside for something as meaningless as bloodline politics. My bloodline, I started, but she waved me off, is exactly what it should be. Trust me, little wolf. I'm very good at reading bloodlines. Her smile held secrets. Better than most council genealogists, I'd wager. Asher and Luna exchanged a look over my head, quick but loaded with meaning. There was definitely something they weren't telling me, something about my presence here that went beyond simple charity. Come, Luna said, taking my arm with maternal gentleness. Let's get you fed and clean. Then we can talk properly. The bathhouse was another marvel of ancient engineering. Natural hot springs channeled through carved stone channels, creating pools of varying temperatures throughout a cavern lit by softly glowing crystals. I sank into the mineral-rich water with a groan of pure bliss, feeling 3 days of grime and terror wash away. When I emerged, clean clothes waited for me, simple but well-made, in deep forest green that complemented my coloring better than anything I'd owned in my former life. The fabric was softer than silk, and it occurred to me that nothing about this pack was as rustic as their reputation suggested. Luna was waiting when I returned to the main hall, along with a meal that made my mouth water. Venison roasted with herbs I couldn't identify, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and some kind of soup that tasted like comfort in a bowl. Eat, she commanded when I hesitated. Everything else can wait. I didn't need to be told twice. I devoured everything she placed in front of me, barely pausing to breathe. It was the first real food I'd had since my exile, and my body responded with desperate gratitude. Better? Luna asked when I finally pushed my empty bowls away.
Much.
Thank you. I meant it. Already I felt more human, more wolf, than I had in days. But I have to ask, why are you being so kind to me? I'm nobody. A cast-off from a pack that decided I wasn't good enough. Aren't you curious about that? Luna settled across from me, violet eyes intent. About why they decided you weren't good enough, I mean. About what they claimed was wrong with your bloodline? The question hit a nerve I'd been trying to ignore. Asher said you're good at reading bloodlines. Can you tell me what they saw? What made them so sure I was tainted? Luna was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Then she smiled, not the gentle, maternal expression she'd worn before, but something sharper, more dangerous. Tell me about your grandmother, child. Elena Moonwhisper. I barely remember her. She died when I was young. I frowned, trying to recall faded memories. My mother said she was a healer, that she helped birth half the pack. And your mother never told you why Elena left her birth pack. My heart stuttered. Mother said grandmother came to Silver Moon to find her mate. My grandfather. Partially true, but not the whole story. Luna leaned forward. Your grandmother Elena wasn't cast out for being a rogue, Kira. She was cast out for being something much more dangerous. I don't understand. She was a Moonborn. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. I'd heard it before. In the oldest legends, the stories elders told cubs to teach them about the power that ran in their veins. But those were just stories, weren't they? That's impossible, I whispered. Moonborn are myths. Legends. Are they? Luna's smile widened. Tell me, child, have you ever felt different from other wolves? Stronger during the full moon? Able to sense things others couldn't? The questions hit me like physical blows because yes, I had felt different. All my life, I'd been able to sense emotions, to read the truth behind lies, to heal faster than I should have. I'd attributed it to being naturally intuitive, naturally resilient. But what if it was something more? The council genealogists weren't wrong about your bloodline being unusual, Luna continued. They were wrong about it being tainted. Moonborn blood doesn't make you unfit to rule, Kira. It makes you one of the most powerful wolves alive.
The world spun around me.
That can't be true. If I had that kind of power, wouldn't I know it? Wouldn't everyone know it? Moonborn abilities are tied to trauma and transformation. Asher's voice came from the doorway, making me jump. I hadn't heard him approach. Most never manifest unless the wolf faces extreme emotional or physical stress. Like exile. Like having your mate reject you, and your pack cast you out. The night you were banished, Luna said softly. Did anything unusual happen? Any strange sensations, any moments where you felt more powerful than you should have? I thought back to that terrible night, to the moment I'd collapsed outside the territorial borders and screamed my grief to the mountains. There had been something, a surge of energy, a sense of the very air responding to my pain. I'd attributed it to hysteria, to the trauma of losing everything. But what if it had been something else entirely? The echo, I whispered. When I screamed, it echoed for miles. Longer and louder than it should have. Luna and Asher exchanged another of those loaded glances. Moonborn can channel their emotions into physical force, Luna explained. Pain into power, grief into strength. It's one of the rarest gifts in our world, and one of the most feared. Feared by whom? By anyone who profits from keeping other wolves small and controllable. Asher's voice carried an edge of anger. By council members who prefer their power structures neat and predictable. By alphas who would rather rule through politics than prove themselves against truly powerful challengers. The implication hit me like a sledgehammer. You think that's why they really exiled me? Not because of tainted blood, but because they were afraid of what I might become. I think, Luna said carefully, that someone recognized what you were and decided you were too dangerous to keep around. Whether that was the council acting on their own or someone else pulling their strings, that remains to be seen. Damon wouldn't. I started, but the protest died on my lips. Wouldn't he? 3 days ago, I would have sworn he'd never exile me either. Now, I didn't know what he was capable of. There's more, Asher said, settling into the chair beside Luna. The reason we were able to find you so quickly, the reason I was in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to save you from that rogue. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a coincidence. We've been watching the Silver Moon borders for weeks, waiting for you to be cast out. His admission was blunt, unapologetic. Luna saw it in a vision, a young Moonborn wolf, exiled and alone, carrying power she didn't understand. We knew we had to find you before anyone else did. Anyone else? There are those who would use a Moonborn's power for their own ends, Luna said grimly. And those who would kill you rather than risk you becoming a threat to their authority. I stared at them both, my mind reeling. In the space of a few hours, I'd gone from being worthless rogue to being some kind of legendary wolf with power I didn't understand and enemies I couldn't identify. This is insane, I said finally. I can't be what you think I am. I would know, wouldn't I? I would have felt it. Power sleeps until it's needed, Luna said gently. And you've spent your whole life in a pack that would have suppressed any unusual abilities, taught you to think of them as aberrations rather than gifts. She was right. The Silver Moon Pack prized conformity above all else. Any wolf who showed unusual abilities was immediately sent for evaluation by the Council's specialists. I'd always assumed it was for training purposes, but now I wondered if it was something darker. So, what happens now? I asked. If I really am this Moonborn thing, what am I supposed to do about it? Learn, Asher said simply. Train. Discover what you're truly capable of. And then, his smile was sharp as a blade. Then you decide whether you want to go back and show the Silver Moon Pack exactly what they threw away. The suggestion sent a thrill through me that was equal parts terror and anticipation. Go back. Face Damon and the Council as something more than the broken, exiled wolf they'd cast out. But even as the fantasy played out in my mind, doubt crept in. What if you're wrong? What if I'm just ordinary? Luna reached across the table and took my hands in hers. The moment our skin touched, warmth flooded through me. Not just physical heat, but something deeper. Something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Close your eyes, she murmured. Open yourself to the moon's power. Let me show you what you are. I wanted to refuse, wanted to cling to the safety of believing I was nothing special. But curiosity won out. I closed my eyes and tried to relax, tried to let down the barriers I'd built around my heart and mind. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Power rushed through me like liquid fire, starting from where Luna's hands touched mine and spreading through every nerve and muscle. I could suddenly sense everything. The heartbeats of every wolf in the settlement, the ancient magic woven into the very stones of Raven's Hollow, the silver threads of moonlight that connected all living things. But most shocking of all, I could sense him. Damon, miles away in his alpha's den, tossing and turning with restless energy. The mate bond hadn't been severed after all. It had just been sleeping, waiting for me to become strong enough to reclaim it. And underneath his restless energy, I felt something else. Regret. Longing. A grief that matched my own. My eyes snapped open, and I gasped as the overwhelming sensations faded back to normal levels. But I could still feel it, the power humming beneath my skin like a second heartbeat, the awareness that I was more than I'd ever imagined. Now do you believe? Luna asked softly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The world looked different now, sharper somehow. More alive. Good. Asher stood, extending his hand to help me up. Then let's begin your real education. Because if my sources are right, you're going to need every bit of power you can muster. Why? I asked, even as I let him pull me to my feet. What aren't you telling me? His expression grew grim. The Silver Moon Council didn't just exile you, Kira. They've put a bounty on your head. And every rogue pack in the Northern Territories is hunting for you. The blood drained from my face. A bounty?
But why?
If they wanted me gone. Dead wolves tell no tales, Luna said quietly. And a Moonborn who lives long enough to master her power becomes a threat they can't control. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed. It wasn't enough that I'd been rejected and exiled. Now I was actively being hunted, marked for death by the very people who should have protected me. How long do I have? I asked. Hard to say. The bounty went out yesterday, but most rogues are cautious about taking contracts in Nightfall territory. Asher's jaw clenched. Still, desperation makes wolves do stupid things. And the bounty is substantial. How substantial? Enough to set up a small pack for life. The number hit me like a physical blow. Whatever the council feared I might become, they feared enough to bankrupt themselves to ensure I never got the chance. Then I need to get stronger, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Fast. Luna smiled, and for the first time since my exile, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Now you're thinking like a Nightfall wolf, she said. Welcome to the real fight, little Moonborn. Time to show the world what you're made of. Chapter 4. Again. Asher's voice cut through my exhaustion like a whip crack, demanding and unforgiving. I dragged myself upright from where I'd collapsed in the training circle, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. 3 hours. We'd been at this for 3 solid hours, and I felt like I'd been trampled by an entire pack. I can't, I gasped, wiping sweat and dirt from my face. I don't have anything left. You're thinking like a beta, he said, circling me with predatory grace. Even after hours of training, he looked barely winded. Beta wolves give up when they're tired. Moonborn wolves find strength in exhaustion. Easy for you to say. You're not the one getting knocked on your ass every 5 minutes. His laugh was sharp and utterly without sympathy. You think this is hard? Wait until someone's actually trying to kill you. They won't care if you're tired. The reminder of the bounty on my head sent a chill through me despite the morning heat. 2 weeks had passed since my arrival at Raven's Hollow. 2 weeks of intensive training that had pushed my body and mind to their absolute limits. And according to Luna's scrying, the rogue packs were getting closer. Focus, Asher commanded, settling back into his fighting stance. Your power doesn't come from muscle, Kira. It comes from will. From the absolute refusal to submit. He was right, and I hated him for it. Over the past 2 weeks, I'd learned that Moonborn abilities weren't just about raw strength, they were about channeling emotion into physical force, about tapping into the primal power that connected all wolves to the moon herself. The problem was, every time I accessed that power, I felt everything. Not just my own emotions, but the residual pain and fear of every wolf who'd ever suffered in these mountains. The weight of centuries of pack conflicts, of broken bonds and shattered hearts. It was overwhelming in a way that left me gasping and disoriented, like drowning in other people's grief. I can feel them, I whispered, pressing my palms against my temples. All of them. Every wolf who's ever been rejected, ever been cast out. It's too much. Asher's expression softened slightly. The empathic connection is the hardest part to master, but it's also your greatest strength. How is feeling everyone else's pain a strength? Because it means you understand what drives people, what motivates them, what breaks them, what makes them willing to fight. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. And because in a world full of wolves who've forgotten how to feel, someone who feels everything is invaluable. There was something in his tone, something personal and raw, that made me look at him more closely. In the 2 weeks I'd been here, Asher had been unfailingly patient as a teacher and utterly closed off as a person. I knew he was powerful, intelligent, and devastatingly attractive in a way that made my traitorous body respond despite the lingering ache of the mate bond. But I knew almost nothing about what made him who he was. Is that what happened to you? I asked softly. Did someone break your ability to feel? His entire body went rigid, and for a moment I thought he might end the training session entirely. But then his shoulders relaxed, and he gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're learning to read people. Good. That's another Moonborn gift. But he didn't answer my question. Now, again. And this time, don't fight the emotions. Let them fuel you. I wanted to push, to demand real answers instead of deflection. But the sound of running footsteps interrupted us before I could speak. Alpha, one of the pack's scouts, burst into the training ground, his face flushed with exertion and fear. We've got movement on the eastern border. Large group moving fast. Asher was instantly alert, all traces of the patient teacher vanishing. How many? At least a dozen. Maybe more. They're not trying to hide their approach. Rogue pack. Unknown. But they're armed and organized. This isn't a random hunting party. My blood turned to ice. After 2 weeks of relative safety, had my hunters finally found me? Get everyone to the safe houses, Asher ordered. Full defensive positions. No one engages until I give the word. What about her? The scout's eyes flicked to me nervously. She stays with me. Alpha, with respect, if they're here for the bounty, then they'll have to go through me to collect it. The words carried absolute finality. Now go. The scout disappeared, leaving us alone in the suddenly ominous training ground. My heart hammered against my ribs as the reality of the situation hit me. They found me, I whispered. Maybe, maybe not. Asher's hand settled on my shoulder, warm and reassuring. Either way, you're not facing this alone. I should run. If I leave now, draw them away from Raven's Hollow.
No.
His grip tightened. Running just means dying tired and alone instead of here with people who care about you. The casual way he said it, people who care about you, sent warmth flooding through my chest. In 2 weeks, this pack had become more of a home than Silvermoon had ever been. The thought of bringing danger to them made me sick. I won't let anyone get hurt because of me, I said. Good. Then let's make sure no one does. He stepped back, his expression grim but determined. Time for your first real test, Moonborn. Are you ready? I wanted to say no. I wanted to confess that I was terrified, that 2 weeks of training couldn't possibly be enough to face whatever was coming for us. But the sound of howls echoing through the valley told me ready or not, the choice had been made for me. What do I do? Trust yourself. Trust your power.
And trust me.
His eyes locked with mine, dark and intense. Can you do that? I nodded, surprised to find that I meant it. Somewhere over the past 2 weeks, Asher had gone from mysterious savior to something deeper, someone I would follow into battle without question.
Good.
Now I need you to extend your senses. Tell me what you feel. I closed my eyes and reached out with the empathic abilities I was still learning to control. Immediately, I was hit with a wave of emotions from the approaching group, hunger, desperation, and underneath it all, a cold determination that made my skin crawl. They're not just here for the bounty, I said, opening my eyes. There's something else. Something personal. Personal how? I don't know. But whoever's leading them, they hate me. Not just because I'm worth money to them, but because of what I represent. I frowned, trying to parse the complex web of emotions I was sensing. They're afraid too. Afraid of what I might become. How many? I reached out again, counting the individual emotional signatures. 15. No, 16. And they have silver weapons. I can smell it from here. Asher cursed under his breath. Silver was the one thing that could permanently harm a shifter, the one weapon that could kill even an alpha if used correctly. Whoever these hunters were, they'd come prepared for war. There's something else, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The leader, I know him. His emotional signature feels familiar. Familiar how? Before I could answer, a howl echoed through the valley, not the hunting call of rogues, but the formal challenge of an alpha demanding parley. It was answered by the deep, resonant call of Asher's own wolf, accepting the challenge. Stay behind me, he ordered as we made our way toward the valley's entrance. No matter what happens, no matter what they say, you stay behind me. But as we crested the hill overlooking the approach to Raven's Hollow, I realized staying hidden wasn't going to be an option. The group spread across the meadow below us wasn't a random collection of rogues. They moved with military precision, their formation designed to cut off any escape routes. And at their head, mounted on a massive black horse that spoke of wealth and status, sat a figure that made my blood run cold. Marcus. Damon's beta. My former friend and the one person I'd trusted to help me gather my belongings before exile. Asher Nightfall. Marcus called out, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. I've come to collect what belongs to the Silvermoon pack. Nothing here belongs to Silvermoon, Asher replied, his own voice projecting alpha authority. You're trespassing on Nightfall territory. We're here for the rogue. Hand her over, and we'll leave peacefully. The casual dismissal, the rogue, as if I were some nameless criminal, sent a spike of fury through me that I felt echo in Asher's posture. There are no rogues under my protection, he said. Only pack members. Marcus laughed, the sound ugly and contemptuous. Pack members? You'd claim that mongrel bitch as one of yours? The slur hit me like a physical blow, but it was nothing compared to the rage that exploded from Asher. The air around us practically vibrated with his fury, and I watched Marcus's horse shy nervously as primal alpha power washed over them. Careful, Asher said, and his voice had dropped to something barely human. You're speaking about someone under my protection. Continue down that path, And this conversation ends very differently. Protection. Marcus spat into the dirt. You have no idea what you're harboring, do you? What that thing really is? Enlighten me. She's an abomination. A freak of nature that should have been put down the moment her true bloodline was discovered. Marcus's eyes found mine across the distance, and the hatred in them was pure and undiluted. The council's genealogists didn't just find rogue blood in her lineage. They found something worse. Marcus, I called out, stepping forward despite Asher's restraining hand. What did you find? His smile was cruel as winter. Tell me, Kira, did your new alpha mention that Moonborn wolves aren't just rare? That historically, every single one has eventually gone insane and slaughtered their own packs. The words hit me like ice water. I looked at Asher, searching his face for denial, for reassurance that Marcus was lying. The guilty flicker in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. You knew, I whispered. You knew, and you didn't tell me. Kira, you knew, and you brought me here anyway. You put your entire pack at risk. The historical accounts are incomplete, he said quickly. Biased. There's no proof that Moonborn nature leads to madness. No proof. Marcus laughed. Tell that to the Redwood Pack. Or the Iron Claws. Or any of the dozen other packs that were wiped out by their own Moonborn members over the centuries. My legs felt weak. Everything I'd been told about my heritage, about my power being a gift, was it all a lie? Was I really just a ticking time bomb waiting to destroy everyone I cared about? Even if that were true, Asher said, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from him, it changes nothing. She's under my protection. Your protection won't matter when she snaps. When the madness takes her, and she tears out your throat while you sleep. Marcus leaned forward in his saddle. Hand her over now, and we'll make her death quick. Painless. Never. The single word rang with absolute finality. Despite everything, despite the revelation about my heritage, despite the danger I might pose, Asher wasn't wavering. Then you've chosen your pack's fate, Marcus said. Silver arrows, boys. Make it clean. The world slowed as the hunters raised their weapons. Silver-tipped arrows gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, all of them aimed directly at me. In seconds, I'd be dead, and probably Asher along with me. But as I stared death in the face, something unexpected happened. The fear vanished. In its place, a cold rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced began to build in my chest. These wolves, my former packmates, had come here to murder me based on ancient stories and unfounded fears. They were willing to kill an innocent alpha and threaten an entire pack because they were too cowardly to let me live. Kira, Asher said urgently, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking, I said, power beginning to thrum through my veins like liquid fire, that I'm tired of running. The first arrow loosed, aimed directly at my heart. I caught it barehanded, the silver burning my palm, even as my enhanced reflexes allowed me to snatch it from the air. Around me, the nightfall wolves gasped in shock. The second arrow followed, then a third. I caught those too, feeling the silver sear my skin but refusing to let the pain stop me. Impossible, Marcus breathed. You're right about one thing, I called out, letting the arrows fall to the ground as my hands healed with impossible speed. I am dangerous, but not to my pack. Power exploded out of me in waves, raw and primal and absolutely devastating. The very air around me began to shimmer with silver light, and I felt the moon's blessing pour through me despite the afternoon sun. This was what I was meant to be. Not a victim, not an exile, but a force of nature that would protect what mattered. To them, I finished and smiled. Marcus screamed an order to retreat, but it was already too late. The hunt was over, and I was no longer the prey.
Chapter 5.
The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. I know because I counted every second as I tore through Marcus's hunting party like a force of nature unleashed. Silver light poured from my skin, turning the afternoon meadow into something otherworldly. My body moved with inhuman speed and grace, dodging arrows and silver blades as if I could see the future itself. And maybe I could. The Moonborn power flooding through me brought heightened senses beyond anything I'd experienced. I could smell Marcus's fierce sweat from 50 yards away, could hear the rapid heartbeats of his hunters as they realized they were the ones being hunted now. The first hunter fell when I simply touched him, my power overloading his nervous system and dropping him unconscious, without a mark on his body. The second tried to shift mid-battle, but I caught him between forms and left him whimpering on the ground, trapped halfway between human and wolf. By the 4th minute, half of Marcus's party was down, and the rest were backing toward their horses in obvious panic. "Stand your ground," Marcus roared, but his own voice cracked with terror. "She's just one wolf." "I'm not just one wolf," I said, and my voice carried across the meadow with unnatural resonance. "I'm the nightmare you created when you chose fear over compassion." Another hunter raised his silver blade, and I gestured almost casually. The weapon flew from his hands and embedded itself in a tree trunk 20 feet away, the metal bent and twisted like a pretzel. That's when the screaming started in earnest. "Retreat," Marcus finally shouted, abandoning any pretense of control. "Fall back to the horses." But I wasn't done with them. Not nearly. Power sang through my veins like liquid starlight, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly alive. This was what I was meant to be, not cowering, not apologizing for existing, but standing tall and making those who had hurt me pay for their arrogance. I reached out with my enhanced senses and wrapped invisible hands around Marcus's horse, holding the animal in place as he tried desperately to spur it into motion. "Going somewhere?" I asked, appearing beside him faster than should have been possible. His face had gone pale as moonlight. "Kira, please. We're following orders. The council sent you to murder me." My voice was calm, conversational even, but the silver light around me pulsed with barely contained violence. "Did you volunteer, Marcus? Or did they have to order you to kill your former friend?" "You're not my friend," he spat, though his hands shook on the reins. "You're an abomination. A monster wearing Kira's face." "Am I?" I tilted my head, genuinely curious. "Tell me, Marcus, when you look at me now, do you see a monster? Or do you see what you could have been if you'd had the courage to be more than Damon's lapdog?" The truth hit him like a physical blow, and I felt his envy and inadequacy crash over me in waves. Marcus had always been the beta, always second best, always in Damon's shadow. Looking at me now, powerful, independent, free, must have been like staring at everything he'd never allowed himself to become. "You don't deserve this power," he whispered. "Maybe not, but I have it anyway." I stepped closer, and his horse shied nervously. "The question is, what am I going to do with it?" For a moment, murder seemed like the obvious answer. It would be so easy to reach out and stop his heart, to end the threat he represented once and for all. The power thrumming through me whispered that it would be justice, that he deserved death for coming here with silver weapons and hatred in his heart. But then I felt something else, a familiar emotional signature at the very edge of my enhanced senses. Damon. He was here, somewhere in the forest beyond the meadow, close enough that I could feel his anguish and desperate worry through our still intact mate bond. He'd come for me. Whether to save me or stop me, I couldn't tell, but he was here. The knowledge hit me like cold water, washing away the murderous rage and leaving me shaking with the effort of controlling so much power. "Get out," I told Marcus, my voice barely above a whisper. "Take your hunters and get out of Nightfall territory. If I see any of you again, I won't be so merciful." He didn't need to be told twice. Within moments, the surviving hunters were mounted and fleeing toward the forest, leaving their unconscious comrades behind. I watched them go, the silver light gradually fading from my skin as exhaustion began to creep in. That's when I noticed the silence. I turned slowly, becoming aware for the first time that the Nightfall wolves had emerged from their defensive positions and were now standing in a wide circle around me. Their faces showed a mixture of awe, fear, and something that looked uncomfortably like worship. None of them would meet my eyes. "Well," I said weakly, trying for humor, "that went better than expected." No one laughed. If anything, the tension in the air grew thicker. Kira. Asher's voice came from directly behind me, carefully neutral. Are you yourself? The question stung more than any of Marcus's insults. I turned to face him, seeing the wariness in his posture, the way his hand rested casually near the silver knife at his belt. You mean am I about to go mad and slaughter everyone? I asked. Honestly, I don't know. It was the truth. The power was still there just under my skin, whispering suggestions about all the things I could do, all the people who deserved punishment. Part of me wanted to chase down Marcus's hunting party and finish what I'd started. Part of me wanted to march straight to Silvermoon territory and show the council exactly what they'd created. And a very small, very quiet part of me wanted to find Damon and make him suffer the way he'd made me suffer. The bloodlust, Luna said, approaching carefully with her hands visible and empty. How strong is it? Strong. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to contain the restless energy that made my skin feel too tight. It's like there's something else in my head now. Something that enjoys violence more than it should. That's normal for a newly awakened Moonborn. The power is intoxicating, especially when it's fueled by righteous anger. She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her calming lavender scent.
But you're still you, child.
You're still in control. Am I? Because it felt good, Luna. Hurting them, scaring them, it felt really good. Of course it did. You've been powerless your entire life, taught to submit and stay small. The first taste of real strength is always overwhelming. Her violet eyes held mine steadily. The question is, what do you choose to do with that feeling? Before I could answer, another voice cut through the air like a blade. Kira. I turned, and there he was, Damon Blackthorn, emerging from the tree line with the fluid grace that had first captured my heart. He looked exactly the same, tall and powerful, with those ice-blue eyes and the kind of presence that made lesser wolves instinctively submit. But as he approached, I realized that wasn't quite true. There were new lines around his eyes, a hollow look to his cheeks that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. His scent, once so comforting, now carried undertones of guilt and regret, so strong they made my enhanced senses recoil. What are you doing here? I asked, proud that my voice came out steady despite the way my heart was hammering. I came to stop this. He gestured toward the unconscious hunters scattered across the meadow. To call off the hunt before anyone got killed. Little late for that, don't you think? He flinched at the ice in my tone. I tried to stop the council from issuing the bounty. Tried to convince them that exile was punishment enough. But you didn't try very hard. I'm still their alpha, Kira. I can't just ignore their will entirely. Can't you? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Or won't you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still choosing them over me. That's not. He stopped, his jaw working as he struggled with words. It's complicated. No, it's really not. The power under my skin pulsed in response to my rising anger. You had a choice between your mate and your political position. You chose politics. Everything else is just excuses. I had to think about the pack. About what was best for everyone. What was best for everyone was letting me stay and prove that the council's fears were unfounded. Instead, you threw me away like garbage and then put a bounty on my head when exile wasn't enough. I never wanted them to hunt you, but you didn't stop them either. The words exploded out of me, carrying enough force to make the nearby trees sway. You let them paint me as a monster, let them convince everyone that I was dangerous, and then acted surprised when they decided to kill me. Damon's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw past the alpha mask to the man underneath, broken, guilt-ridden, desperate for forgiveness he didn't deserve. I'm sorry, he whispered. Kira, I'm so sorry. I know I failed you. I know I was a coward. But I was trying to protect you. Protect me? The laugh that came out of me was sharp enough to cut glass. You exiled me. You cut me off from everyone I loved and sent me into the wilderness to die. I thought if you were gone, if you were far enough away, the council would lose interest. I thought you'd be safe. Safe? I almost died 3 times in the first week. I was attacked by rogues, hunted by bounty seekers, and slowly going insane from isolation. Silver light began to flicker around my hands again. Your protection nearly killed me. I know, and I hate myself for it. But you're alive and you're strong, and I'm dangerous. I stepped closer, letting him feel the power radiating from my skin. Isn't that what this is really about, Damon? You're not here to apologize. You're here because you're terrified of what I've become. He opened his mouth to deny it, but I pressed on. You should be terrified. Because the broken little beta you threw away?
She's gone.
In her place is something new, something that doesn't need your approval or your protection. The silver light pulsed brighter. Something that could destroy your precious pack without breaking a sweat. Kira, please. Please what? Please forgive you? Please come home and pretend none of this happened. I shook my head. I'm not that person anymore. And even if I were, what makes you think I'd want to go back to a pack that treated me like a disease to be cured? Because we're mates, he said desperately. Because the moon goddess chose us for each other. That has to count for something. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the old pull, the golden thread that had once connected our souls. But it was frayed now, damaged by betrayal and neglect, and it no longer felt like home. It felt like a chain. The moon goddess chose us, I agreed. But you rejected that choice. You can't have it both ways, Damon. You can't throw away something sacred and then demand it back when it's convenient. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me.
No.
The single word hit him like a physical blow. What?
No.
I won't let you make it up to me. I won't give you the chance to hurt me again. I stepped back, putting distance between us. Find another mate, Damon. One who'll be satisfied with scraps of your attention and half-hearted protection. There is no other mate. There's only you. There's only ever been you. Then I guess you'll be alone. The cruelty of the words surprised even me, but I felt no regret as I watched him crumble. This was justice. This was what he deserved for choosing duty over love, politics over passion. Kira, Asher's voice cut through the tension, gentle but firm. That's enough. I turned to glare at him. Is it? Because I think I'm just getting started. And that's exactly why you need to stop. He moved between me and Damon, his dark eyes serious. The power is affecting your judgment. You're not yourself right now. Maybe this is who I really am. Maybe the old Kira was just pretending to be weak. The old Kira was compassionate. She wouldn't destroy someone just because she could. The old Kira was a fool who let people walk all over her. The old Kira was someone worth saving. His words were quiet, but they cut through my anger like a blade. Don't let them take that away from you too. For a moment, the bloodlust wavered. Through the haze of power and rage, I caught a glimpse of what I was becoming: cruel, vindictive, exactly the kind of monster the Council had painted me as. But before I could process that thought fully, movement in the forest caught my attention. More figures emerging from the trees, wearing the distinctive silver and blue of the Silvermoon Council Guard. They'd brought an army. You son of a bitch, I breathed, turning back to Damon. This was a setup. You came here to distract me while they surrounded us.
No.
Kira, no, I swear I didn't know. But I was no longer listening. The betrayal, real or perceived, shattered the last of my self-control, and power exploded out of me in waves that lit up the entire valley. This time, I wasn't going to hold back. This time, someone was going to pay. Chapter 6. The Silvermoon Council Guard emerged from the forest like a tide of silver and steel. 30 wolves in full battle armor, each one carrying enough silver weapons to kill a dozen alphas. At their head walked a figure that made my blood freeze in my veins. Elder Matthias Greystone, the Council's chief enforcer, and the one wolf in all the northern territories who specialized in hunting down rogue supernatural threats. He was ancient, probably pushing 3 centuries, with steel-gray hair and eyes like chips of winter ice. Power radiated from him in waves that spoke of old magic, forbidden knowledge, and a complete willingness to do whatever it took to maintain order. Even through my rage, I recognized the trap for what it was. They hadn't just come to collect a bounty. They'd come to end the Moonborn threat once and for all. "Kira Moonwhisper," Matthias called out, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "By order of the Grand Council of the Northern Territories, you are declared a threat to pack stability and supernatural order. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." "Counteroffer?" I replied, silver light beginning to pour from my skin like liquid starlight. "You turn around, walk away, and maybe I'll let half of you live." His laugh was like grinding stone. Brave words from a whelp who's had power for all of 2 weeks. "Do you think you're the first Moonborn I've put down, child?" The casual admission hit me like a physical blow. He'd done this before. Hunted down others like me, killed them before they could reach their full potential. How many? How many wolves with my gift had died because the council feared what they couldn't control? How many? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Enough to know exactly how this ends. He raised his hand, and the guards spread out in a perfect circle, cutting off all escape routes. Moonborn power burns bright, but it burns out quickly. You're already exhausted from your little display. In an hour, you'll barely be able to shift, let alone fight. He was right, and we both knew it. The battle with Marcus's hunters had drained more of my reserves than I'd realized. The power still flowed through me, but it felt different now, less controlled, more volatile. Like a fire that was consuming its own fuel. "Then I guess I better make this quick," I said. I moved faster than thought, crossing the 50 yards between us in the space of a heartbeat. Matthias was ready for me, ancient reflexes and centuries of experience allowing him to dodge my first strike and counter with a silver blade that would have opened my throat if I hadn't twisted away at the last second. "Fast," he acknowledged, pressing his attack with fluid precision. "But sloppy. Moonborn power makes you overconfident." He was right about that too. The intoxicating rush of supernatural strength was making me reckless, making me rely on raw power instead of technique. But as his blade whistled past my ear, I realized I had advantages he didn't expect. "Maybe," I agreed, catching his wrist and using his own momentum to send him flying into a tree. "But it also makes me unpredictable." The impact should have stunned him. Instead, he rolled with it, coming up with 2 more silver knives in his hands and a smile that promised pain. Enough playing. His form began to shimmer, and I felt my heart sink as I realized what he was about to do. Matthias wasn't just an old wolf, he was something else entirely. Something that had been hidden beneath the facade of council enforcer until now. The air around him darkened, shadows coiling like living things, and when the transformation completed, I found myself facing not a wolf, but something out of the oldest nightmares. A revenant. One of the death-touched, wolves who'd made bargains with dark magic to extend their lives beyond natural limits. They were nearly extinct, hunted to the edge of oblivion centuries ago for good reason. They were almost impossible to kill. Surprised? His voice now carried harmonics that made my bones ache. "The council has many secrets, little Moonborn. This is just one of them." He attacked again, but this time his speed matched mine, his strength exceeded it, and every blow he landed carried the chill of the grave. Silver light met writhing shadow as we crashed through the forest, our battle leaving a trail of shattered trees and scorched earth. Around us, the 2 sides clashed in earnest. Nightfall wolves, outnumbered 3-1, fought with desperate courage against the council guard. I caught glimpses of Asher in the melee, moving like liquid death as he carved through silver-armored opponents, but even his skill couldn't overcome the numbers they faced. "Your pack is dying," Matthias taunted as his claws raked across my ribs, leaving trails of frost that made my healing sluggish. "Every second you waste fighting me is another of your new friends bleeding out in the dirt." He was right. I could feel them. Luna crying out as a silver blade found her shoulder, young Thomas falling with an arrow in his thigh, elder Marcus, not the same Marcus who'd fled earlier, going down hard as 3 guards overwhelmed him. They were dying because of me. because I'd brought this war to their doorstep. The realization broke something inside me, not my power, but my last restraint against using it fully. You want to see what a Moonborn can really do? I snarled, letting go of every limit I'd imposed on myself. Let me show you. Power exploded out of me in a nova of silver fire that lit up the entire valley. The force of it sent Matthias flying backward, his shadow-wreathed form smoking where my light had touched him. Around us, the battle froze as every wolf, friend and foe alike, felt the raw magnitude of what I'd just unleashed. Impossible, Matthias breathed, struggling to his feet. No Moonborn has ever channeled that much power without going insane? I laughed, and the sound echoed with harmonics that made the very air tremble. Who says I haven't? And maybe I had, because as the power coursed through me, I felt something fundamental shift in my consciousness. The empathic abilities that had been overwhelming me suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity, allowing me to feel every heartbeat, every emotion, every intention within a mile radius. I could sense Damon's anguish as he watched our battle from the forest edge, torn between duty and love. I could feel Asher's desperate worry as he fought his way toward me through the chaos. I could taste the fear of the council guards as they realized they might have bitten off more than they could chew. And underneath it all, I could sense something else, a vast network of power that connected every wolf in the Northern Territories, invisible threads of pack bonds and ancient magic that I could reach out and touch. You feel it now, don't you? Matthias had recovered, his form wreathed in darkness again, but there was new wariness in his ancient eyes. The temptation. The ability to reach into their minds, to control them, to make them all bow to your will. He was right. The power was there, waiting. I could feel every pack bond within 100 miles, could sense the weakness in each connection. It would be so easy to reach out, to sever Damon's bond with his pack, to turn the council guards against their masters, to make every wolf in the territory kneel before me. That's what drove the others mad, Matthias continued, circling me like a predator. The realization that they could control everyone, that they didn't have to be hurt or rejected or cast aside ever again. They lost themselves in the power, became tyrants who had to be put down for the good of all. Maybe they were right, I said, and part of me meant it. Maybe the world would be better if someone like me was in charge. And maybe, a familiar voice said from behind me, you should remember who you're fighting for before you decide to become the very thing they accused you of being. I turned, and there was Asher, bloodied and battered from the battle but still standing. His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that cut through the power-drunk haze. This isn't you, Kira, he said gently. The woman I've come to know over the past 2 weeks wouldn't threaten innocent wolves just because she could. Wouldn't she? But even as I said it, doubt crept in. They cast me out. They hunted me. They came here to kill everyone I care about. They did. And you have every right to defend yourself, to protect your new pack. He stepped closer, ignoring the silver light that still poured from my skin. But that's not what you're talking about now. You're talking about conquest. About making them pay for hurting you. They deserve to pay. Maybe they do, but that's not who you are. Another step closer. You're the woman who helped birth half the cubs in Silvermoon territory, who spent her nights tending to injured wolves and asking for nothing in return, who loved with her whole heart even when that heart got broken. Each word hit me like a physical blow, cutting through the intoxicating rush of unlimited power. He was right. The woman he described, that was who I'd been. Who I still was, underneath all the rage and hurt and desperate need for control. I don't want to be weak anymore, I whispered. There's nothing weak about choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy, he replied. That's not weakness, Kira. That's strength. The silver light around me flickered, wavered. For a moment, I teetered on the edge between the woman I'd been and the monster I could become. That's when Matthias struck. His shadow-wreathed claws caught Asher in the side, sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. Silver blood, the mark of deep wounds that wouldn't heal quickly, began to pool beneath him. Touching, the revenant sneered. But ultimately pointless. Your choice isn't between mercy and vengeance, little Moonborn. It's between dying as yourself or living as something greater. Rage exploded through me again, but this time it was different. Not the cold, calculating anger that had whispered about conquest and control, but the hot, protective fury of someone watching their loved one suffer. "You hurt him," I said, and my voice carried death in every syllable. "I did. And I'll do worse unless you surrender now." His blade pressed against Asher's throat. "Your choice, come quietly, and he lives. Fight me, and I'll make you watch him die slowly." The threat crystallized everything for me. This wasn't about power or revenge, or showing the world what I could do. This was about protecting the people who'd given me a home when I had nothing, who'd accepted me when my own pack had thrown me away. "You know what, Matthias?" I said, the silver light around me shifting from wild, chaotic energy to something focused and precise. "You're absolutely right. About what? This is my choice. And I choose." I smiled and let him see exactly what kind of monster I could be when someone threatened my family. "To end you." What happened next wasn't a battle, it was an execution. I moved with surgical precision, my power no longer a wild storm but a scalpel that cut through his defenses like they were made of paper. Every blow was calculated, designed not just to hurt but to systematically dismantle centuries of dark magic and stolen life. When it was over, Matthias lay broken in the center of a circle of melted silver and scorched earth. Around us, the surviving council guards had dropped their weapons and fallen to their knees in surrender. The threat was ended. The valley was safe. And I was still myself.
Barely.
"Kira," Asher called weakly from where he lay. "It's over. You can let go now." He was right. The immediate danger had passed. But the power still sang in my veins, whispering about all the things I could still do, all the wrongs I could still right. It would be so easy to reach out to the kneeling guards, to make them pay for following orders. So easy to extend my senses towards Silvermoon territory and show Damon's pack what real power looked like. So easy to become everything they'd feared I would be. Instead, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let it all go. The silver light faded. The overwhelming connections to every wolf in the territory snapped back to normal levels. The intoxicating rush of unlimited power dwindled to a manageable flow. I was just Kiro again. Tired, hurting, but still fundamentally myself. "Is he alive?" I asked, kneeling beside Asher and pressing my hands to his wounds. "Barely," he managed, but he was smiling. "Good thing I heal fast. Good thing I didn't lose myself completely," I replied, channeling what little power I had left into speeding his healing. Never doubted it for a second. Liar. Maybe a little. His hand covered mine, warm and reassuring. "But you proved me right in the end." Around us, the aftermath of battle painted the valley in silver and red. We'd won, but the cost had been high.
Too high.
And somewhere in the forest beyond, I could still sense Damon's presence, watching and waiting for something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for now, it was enough that we'd survived. For now, it was enough that I was still me. Chapter 7. The healers worked through the night. I sat beside Asher's bed in the Nightfall Infirmary, watching his chest rise and fall with the steady rhythm of deep healing sleep. The silver poisoning from Matthias's claws had been worse than we'd initially thought. The Revenant's touch carried a corruption that fought against natural regeneration, leaving wounds that festered with dark magic. It had taken everything Luna and I had working together to cleanse the poison from his system. "He's stable now," Luna said softly, settling into the chair across from me. Dark circles shadowed her violet eyes, and silver streaked her hair where there had been none before. Healing a Revenant's poison had aged her decades in a single night. The fever broke an hour ago. "Will there be any permanent damage?" I asked, not taking my eyes off his face. Even unconscious, he looked troubled, his brow furrowed with dreams I couldn't reach. "Physically?"
No.
"The corruption is gone, and his body is healing normally." Luna paused, choosing her words carefully. But revenant poison affects more than just flesh. It can leave psychological marks, nightmares, sensitivity to darkness, and aversion to shadow magic. He saved my life, I said quietly. If he hadn't stopped me when he did, I would have become exactly what they accused me of being. Perhaps. Or perhaps you would have found your way back on your own. Luna's hand settled on my shoulder, warm and comforting. Either way, he chose to trust you with his life. That says something about both his judgment and your character. I wanted to believe her, but the memory of how good it had felt to hold that much power, to know I could control anyone and anything within miles, still made my skin crawl. For those few moments, I'd understood exactly why previous Moonborn had gone mad with the possibilities. Luna, I said hesitantly, when I was channeling that much power, I could feel everything. Every pack bond, every connection between wolves. I could have reached out and manipulated them. But you didn't. Because Asher stopped me. But what happens next time? What happens when someone I care about isn't there to pull me back? She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those ancient eyes. Tell me, child, when you felt that temptation, what did it promise you? Control. Safety. The ability to make sure no one could ever hurt me again. The words came out in a rush. I could have made Damon love me, made the council bow to my will, forced everyone to accept me. And would any of that have been real? The question hit me like cold water. What do you mean? Love that's compelled isn't love at all. It's slavery. Respect that's forced is just fear wearing a prettier mask. Luna leaned forward, her expression intent. If you had taken that power, you would have gotten everything you thought you wanted and found it turn to ash in your mouth. She was right, and I knew it. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones were two different things. The other Moonborn who went mad, I said, how long did it take? How long before the power consumed them completely? It varied. Some fell within days of their awakening. Others lasted years, even decades, before the isolation of unlimited power finally broke them. Her voice carried the weight of old grief. But they all had one thing in common. They tried to face their gift alone. I'm not alone. No, you're not. And that may make all the difference. She stood, smoothing down her robes. The council survivors have requested an audience. They're waiting in the Great Hall. My stomach clenched. What do they want? To negotiate, I imagine. Matthias was their greatest weapon against supernatural threats. With him gone, they're vulnerable in ways they haven't been for centuries. Luna's smile was sharp. They need you more than you need them now. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a nobody they could exile without consequence. Now I was powerful enough that the same council was asking for meetings instead of simply ordering my death. What should I tell them? Whatever you think is right. You're not a subject anymore, Kira. You're a power in your own right, and it's time you started acting like it. The Great Hall had been hastily repaired after the battle, but scorch marks still decorated the ancient stone walls where stray magic had struck during the fighting. 5 council members sat at the long table, all that remained of the governing body that had once numbered 12. At their head sat Elder Cordelia Silverthorn, Damon's great-aunt and the closest thing the council had to a moderate voice. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her gray eyes held the kind of political calculation that came from centuries of navigating pack politics. Kira Moonwhisper, she said as I entered, rising from her chair in a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Elder Silverthorn. I took the seat at the opposite end of the table, deliberately choosing the position of power. I have to admit, I'm curious about what the council could possibly want to discuss with a dangerous rogue. Her mouth tightened at the reminder of their earlier stance. Recent events have clarified certain misunderstandings about your heritage and abilities. Misunderstandings? I let ice creep into my voice. Is that what we're calling your attempt to have me murdered? The bounty was issued based on incomplete information, another council member said quickly. We had no idea that Matthias was acting beyond his authority. Matthias was following your orders. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. Cordelia raised a hand, silencing her colleague. You're right. We authorized the hunt, and we take full responsibility for that decision. It was poorly considered. The admission surprised me. I'd expected denials, justifications, anything but a straightforward acknowledgement of guilt. What's the real reason you're here? I asked. Because the supernatural world is changing, and we need allies who understand that change. Cordelia folded her hands on the table. Matthias wasn't just our enforcer. He was our institutional memory. 3 centuries of knowledge about supernatural threats, ancient magics, and forgotten dangers died with him. And you think I can replace that knowledge? We think your abilities make you uniquely qualified to help us navigate what's coming. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Matthias's death has already sent ripples through the supernatural community. Rogue necromancers, ancient vampires, displaced fae, they're all going to test our boundaries now that our primary deterrent is gone. The implications hit me like a physical blow. I'd killed Matthias to protect my pack, but in doing so, I'd potentially destabilize the entire supernatural ecosystem of the Northern Territories. You want me to become your new enforcer, I said. We want to offer you a partnership. A seat on the council, with full voting rights and territorial autonomy for the Nightfall Pack. Cordelia's offer was carefully calculated, designed to appeal to both my personal desires and my pack loyalties. In exchange, you would help us deal with supernatural threats that conventional forces can't handle. And Damon? What does your new alpha think about offering his rejected mate a position of power? Pain flickered across her features. Damon has recused himself from council decisions regarding you. He felt his personal involvement compromised his judgment. At least he had that much self-awareness. But the fact that he wasn't here, wasn't fighting for this chance to rebuild what we'd lost, told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. I'll need time to consider your offer, I said. Of course. But Kira... Cordelia's voice dropped to something almost pleading. We can't undo what was done to you. But we can ensure it never happens again. Not to you. Not to any other Moonborn who might awaken in the future. And what makes you think there will be others? Because power like yours doesn't emerge in isolation. The fact that you've awakened suggests that something is changing in the supernatural world, something that's calling forth abilities that have been dormant for generations. Her gray eyes held mine steadily. We can help you find them, train them, protect them from those who would exploit or destroy them. The offer was tempting, I had to admit. The chance to prevent other Moonborn from suffering what I'd endured, to build something better than the system that had cast me out, it appealed to every protective instinct I possessed. But it also felt like a trap. The council had proven they were willing to kill to maintain their version of order. What guarantee did I have that they wouldn't turn on me again the moment I became inconvenient? I said I'd consider it. I repeated firmly. You'll have my answer within the week. After the council members left, I found myself walking the moonlit paths of Raven's Hollow, trying to process everything that had happened. The settlement was quieter than usual. Too many of the pack were still recovering from the battle, too many beds in the infirmary filled with wolves who'd bled for my right to exist. The guilt was overwhelming. Having second thoughts about rejecting their offer? Asher's voice came from behind me, rough with exhaustion but wonderfully alive. I turned to find him leaning against a tree, pale but upright. You should be resting. Should be a lot of things. He pushed off from the tree and walked over to join me. Answer the question. Maybe. The council's right about one thing, Matthias's death is going to have consequences. And if other Moonborn are awakening... I shook my head. I can't let them go through what I went through. Noble. But is working with the people who tried to kill you really the best way to help them? What's the alternative? Start my own supernatural police force. Why not? His casual tone made me look at him sharply. You've got the power, the moral authority, and a pack that would follow you into hell. What more do you need? Experience. Knowledge. Resources. I laughed bitterly. I'm 24 years old, Asher. 3 weeks ago, I was a nobody healer in a backwater pack. I'm not qualified to reshape the supernatural world. You're qualified to know right from wrong. You're qualified to recognize injustice and fight against it. Everything else can be learned. His faith in me was both touching and terrifying. And if I make the wrong choice, if my inexperience gets people killed, then you'll learn from it and do better next time. That's how leadership works. You make the best decision you can with the information you have, and you live with the consequences. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the moonlight turning the forest around us into something magical. Despite everything that had happened, despite the weight of impossible choices pressing down on me, I felt peaceful, content in a way I hadn't experienced since before my exile. "Can I ask you something?" I said eventually. "Anything." "Why did you really save me that night?" The truth this time, not the deflection about old debts and ancient promises. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I saw myself in you." "What do you mean?" "I was exiled once too. Different circumstances, different reasons, but the pain was the same. The feeling of being cast aside by people who were supposed to protect you, of having your whole identity stripped away in a single moment." His hands clenched at his sides. "I know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild yourself from nothing." The admission hit me like a physical blow. "What happened?" "I made the mistake of falling in love with someone my pack considered beneath me. A human woman who worked as a veterinarian in the nearby town." His smile was sad and distant. "When the pack found out, they gave me an ultimatum. Give her up or leave forever. And you chose her." "I chose her. Lived as a human for 10 years. Tried to build a normal life. We even got married, started talking about having children." His voice broke slightly. "Then the cancer came." "Oh, Asher. I could have turned her. Could have shared my immortality, made her pack, so she could fight the disease. But she'd made me promise never to change her against her will, never to take away her humanity." He stopped walking, his entire body tense with old pain. "So I watched her die, inch by inch, while I had the power to save her, and couldn't use it. I'm so sorry." That's when I understood the real cruelty of choice. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything that matters to you. Sometimes love means letting go even when it destroys you. We stood there in the moonlight, two broken souls who'd found each other in the darkness. I understood now why he'd recognized something in me that first night, why he'd been so determined to help me heal. "Is that why you never tried to find another mate?" I asked softly.
Partly.
"But also because..." He turned to face me, his dark eyes intense in the moonlight. "Because I was waiting for someone who would understand. Someone who knew what it meant to lose everything and keep fighting anyway." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I could feel something shifting in the air, a tension that had been building for weeks finally reaching a breaking point. "Asher," I whispered, but I didn't know how to finish the thought. "I know you're still bonded to him," he said quickly. "I know that what you had with Damon was real, and I'm not asking you to pretend otherwise. But Kira, what I feel for you is real too. The mate bond isn't the only way two people can love each other. Sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones we choose, not the ones fate forces on us." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the silver flecks in his dark eyes, could smell his scent of pine and winter air. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I'm not asking you to choose right now," he said. "I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more than one kind of forever." And then, before I could respond, before I could think of all the reasons this was complicated and dangerous and wrong, he leaned down and kissed me. The kiss was gentle, tentative, nothing like the desperate passion I'd shared with Damon. But it was warm and sweet and real, and it tasted like hope. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. "Consider it," he said again, and then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows between the trees. I stood there in the moonlight, touching my lips and feeling my world shift yet again. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a simple healer with a simple life. Now I was a moonborn wolf with the power to reshape the supernatural world, being courted by both the council and the man who'd saved my life. The old Kira would have been overwhelmed by the choices, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision. But the new Kira, the woman who'd faced down revenants and council armies, who'd tasted unlimited power and chosen to remain human, she was ready to start making some choices of her own. The question was, which path would lead to the kind of future she actually wanted? Chapter 8. I woke before dawn to the sound of wolves howling in distress. The calls echoed across Ravenshalla's valley, not the hunting songs or territorial markers I was used to, but the deep, mournful wails that signaled death or disaster. I was out of bed and running toward the source before I was fully conscious, my bare feet finding purchase on the frost-covered paths without thought. The commotion centered around the main gate, where a crowd of nightfall wolves had gathered in a loose circle. As I pushed through them, my heart nearly stopped at what I saw. My mother, Elena Moonwhisper, knelt in the center of the circle, her clothes torn and bloodied, her usually pristine appearance ravaged by what looked like days of hard travel. But it was her eyes that truly frightened me, hollow, haunted, filled with a desperation I'd never seen in her before. "Mama?" The word came out as barely a whisper. Her head snapped up at my voice, and relief flooded her features so completely that she began to sob.
Kira.
"Oh, Goddess, Kira, you're alive." I dropped to my knees beside her, pulling her into my arms as she shook with exhaustion and emotion. She felt smaller than I remembered, more fragile, as if the weeks since my exile had aged her decades. "What are you doing here?" I asked, smoothing her gray-streaked hair. "How did you even find me?" "I've been looking for you since the night you left," she said between ragged breaths. "Following rumors, tracking old stories about the Nightfall Pack. I had to find you, had to warn you." "Warn me about what?" Her grip on my arms tightened painfully. "The Council. They're not done with you, Kira. The meeting with the survivors, the offer of partnership, it's all a trap." Ice flooded my veins. "What do you mean?" "I overheard them planning it. They know they can't kill you directly, not after what happened to Matthias. So they're going to use me." "Use you how?" Before she could answer, the sound of approaching horses echoed from the forest beyond the gate. My enhanced senses immediately picked up the scents, Silvermoon wolves, at least a dozen of them, moving fast and armed for battle. "They followed me," my mother whispered, terror creeping into her voice. "I tried to lose them, tried to take a route they couldn't track, but you led them right to us." Asher's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. He emerged from the crowd, fully armed and radiating the kind of cold fury that made lesser wolves instinctively step back. "It wasn't her fault," I said quickly, rising to put myself between them. "She was trying to warn us." "Was she? Or is this exactly what they planned?" His dark eyes fixed on my mother with laser intensity. "Funny how she managed to find our hidden valley when it's taken season trackers years to locate us in the past." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think she's working with them?" "I think we're about to find out." He gestured toward the gate, where the approaching riders were now visible through the trees. "Because here comes the rest of the trap." At the head of the approaching force rode Elder Cordelia Silverthorn, but she wasn't alone. Beside her, looking every inch the powerful alpha despite the torment I could feel radiating from him, rode Damon. My heart clenched at the sight of him. Even after everything that had happened, even knowing what he'd chosen over me, part of me still responded to his presence, like a flower turning toward the sun. "Kira Moonwhisper," Cordelia called out as they drew near the gate. "We've come to collect what was stolen from us." "Nothing here was stolen," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Unless you're talking about the life you tried to take. We're talking about Elena Moonwhisper, who fled Silvermoon territory in violation of her oath of loyalty." Cordelia's gray eyes were cold as winter stone. "Return her to us, and we'll consider your territorial violations forgiven." "Territorial violations?" Asher stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his sword hilt. "This is sovereign Nightfall land. You're the ones violating territory." "Not anymore." Damon spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of alpha authority. "As of yesterday, The Northern Council has voted to revoke Nightfall's territorial status. You're no longer recognized as a legitimate pack. The words hit the assembled Nightfall wolves like a physical blow. I could feel their shock and outrage rippling through the crowd, along with something darker. Fear for their future, their safety, their very identity. You can't do that, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they could. Pack status was granted by council vote, and it could be revoked the same way. We not only can, we have, Cordelia replied smoothly. The Nightfall pack is hereby dissolved. Any wolf who wishes to retain legitimate pack status has 24 hours to petition for membership in an approved territory. And those who don't, Asher's voice was deadly quiet, will be classified as rogues and treated accordingly. The threat was clear.
Submit or die.
It was the council's final gambit. They couldn't kill me directly, but they could destroy everything I cared about unless I surrendered. There is, however, an alternative, Damon said, and his eyes locked with mine across the distance. Kira Moonwhisper can return to Silvermoon territory to face judgment for her actions against council forces. If she submits to our authority, the Nightfall Pack status will be restored. And what exactly would this judgment entail? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. A formal trial before the full council. If you're found guilty of attacking legitimate supernatural authorities, which I will be, then the sentence would be death. But, Cordelia added quickly, if you're found innocent, all charges would be dropped and you'd be free to live wherever you choose. It was a pretty lie wrapped around an ugly truth. There was no way the council would ever find me innocent, not when my continued existence threatened their version of order. This was just a way to execute me legally while appearing merciful. And if I refuse? I asked. Then every wolf in this valley dies as a rogue. Damon's voice cracked slightly on the words, but his resolve didn't waver. Including your mother. I looked at Elena, still kneeling where I'd left her, tears streaming down her face. She was shaking her head frantically, silently begging me not to sacrifice myself for her. But around us, 43 wolves waited for my decision. Wolves who'd welcomed me when I had nothing, who'd fought and bled for my right to exist, who'd made me part of their family when my own had cast me aside. I need a moment to consider, I said. You have 5 minutes, Cordelia replied. Then we require an answer. I helped my mother to her feet and guided her away from the crowd, Asher falling into step beside us. When we were far enough away to speak privately, I turned to face them both. It's a trap, Asher said immediately. You go with them, you die. Simple as that. And if I don't, everyone else dies, I replied. Also simple. There has to be another way. What way? You heard them. They've revoked our pack status. Without council recognition, we're just a group of rogues squatting on unclaimed land. They have every legal right to exterminate us. Legal according to laws they wrote to benefit themselves. Legal is legal, Asher. And right now they hold all the power. My mother grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. Kira, there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago. What? Your grandmother Elena, the one you were named for, she didn't just have Moonborn blood. My mother's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She was the last of the ancient bloodlines. The original pack founders, the ones who made the first treaties with the moon goddess herself. The revelation hit me like lightning. That's impossible. The ancient bloodlines died out centuries ago. That's what everyone believes. But Elena survived, went into hiding, changed her name and history to protect herself and her descendants. My mother's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Kira, you're not just Moonborn. You're the last living heir to the primordial pack, the wolves who founded the council itself. What does that mean? It means, Asher said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice, that by ancient law, you outrank every member of the current council. Your bloodline predates their authority. But only if she can prove it, my mother added quickly. And the only evidence is hidden in the Silvermoon territory, in the vault beneath the council chambers.
Of course it was.
The one place I couldn't go without walking into their trap. There's more, my mother continued. The real reason they want you dead isn't just because they fear your power. It's because if your true heritage becomes known, their entire system of government becomes illegitimate. You don't just threaten their authority, you make it irrelevant. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. Not only was I the most powerful Moonborn in centuries, I was also potentially the rightful ruler of the Northern Territories. No wonder the Council was so desperate to eliminate me. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. Because I hoped you'd never need to know. I hoped you could live a normal life, find happiness with your mate, stay safely invisible. Her voice broke. But they couldn't leave you alone. They couldn't let you just exist. So what do? You do what your grandmother would have done, my mother said firmly. You fight. Not just for yourself, but for every wolf who's ever been oppressed by their corrupt system. I can't fight the entire council. Not alone. You won't be alone. Asher's hand found mine, warm and reassuring. Whatever you decide, the Nightfall Pact stands with you. Even if it means death? Especially then. We've been rogues before, Kira. We know how to survive outside their system. His smile was sharp as a blade. Besides, they made one critical mistake. Which is, they assumed we'd play by their rules. Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of shifting shapes echoed from the forest around us. Wolves began emerging from the trees, not council forces, but rogues. Dozens of them, surrounding the Silver Moon party with predatory grace. You see, Asher continued conversationally, the thing about dissolving our pact status is that it freed us from certain diplomatic constraints. We're no longer bound by council law or territorial treaties. Understanding dawned on me like sunlight. You're not just going to let them take me. Oh, I'm going to do much more than that. His eyes were dark with promise. I'm going to show them what happens when you threaten something I protect. The 5-minute deadline had expired, but instead of waiting for my answer, Asher had been preparing for war. The rogues surrounding the Silver Moon party weren't random outcasts. They were organized, armed, and clearly following his orders. This is madness, my mother whispered. They'll call in reinforcements. The entire council. Can try, Asher agreed. But they'll have to find us first. And we've been disappearing from their notice for 800 years. A horn sounded from the direction of the gate, Cordelia demanding an answer. But as I looked at the determined faces around me, at the wolves who'd chosen to stand with me even unto death, I realized the answer had been obvious all along. I wasn't going to submit to their judgment. I wasn't going to let them destroy my new family. And I definitely wasn't going to let them continue terrorizing innocent wolves just because they threatened the status quo. Tell me about this evidence, I said to my mother. Tell me everything about the vault and how to access it. Kira, you can't possibly be thinking. I'm thinking it's time someone challenged their authority. I turned to Asher, decision crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on still water. How do you feel about a little breaking and entering? His grin was absolutely feral. I thought you'd never ask. The horn sounded again, more insistently this time. But instead of walking toward surrender, I started planning for revolution. The council wanted to judge me?
Fine.
But I was going to judge them right back. And unlike their kangaroo court, my judgment was going to be based on truth. Chapter 9. The council chambers lay beneath Silver Moon territory like a sleeping beast, ancient stone corridors that had witnessed 8 centuries of pack politics and supernatural law. I moved through them like a ghost, my Moonborn abilities allowing me to muffle my footsteps and mask my scent from the guards stationed throughout the complex. Getting into the territory had been easier than expected. While the council forces waited at Raven's Hollow for my surrender, Asher's rogue network had created diversions across 3 different borders, drawing most of the security forces away from the heartland. The few guards left behind were focused on external threats, not a single infiltrator moving through shadows they'd never learned to see. Still, my heart hammered against my ribs as I descended the final staircase toward the vault level. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and I'd be trapped in the belly of the beast with no way out. The vault door stood before me like a monument to paranoia, 6 inches of silver-reinforced steel, covered in protective wards that made my skin crawl from 20 feet away. But my mother's intelligence had been accurate. The door was keyed to ancient bloodline magic, designed to recognize the genetic markers of the original pack founders. I pressed my palm against the central ward, feeling silver fire race through my veins as the ancient magic tested my heritage. For a moment, nothing happened, and I wondered if my mother had been wrong about our bloodline. Then the door swung open with barely a whisper. The vault beyond was a cathedral of secrets. A crystalline storage matrices lined the walls from floor to ceiling, each one containing thousands of years of supernatural history. Pack genealogies, territorial treaties, records of supernatural threats. The entire foundation of council authority was stored in this single room. But it was the central pedestal that drew my attention like a magnet. Upon it sat a single crystal sphere, pulsing with soft silver light that seemed to call to something deep in my bones. The primordial record. The original treaty between the first wolves and the moon goddess herself, preserved in crystallized starlight for all eternity. I approached it with reverence, understanding that I was in the presence of something truly sacred. This wasn't just history. This was the moment when wolves first learned to change, first gained the blessing of the moon, first became more than simple animals. The crystal was warm beneath my fingers as I lifted it from its pedestal. The moment my skin made contact, the world exploded into silver fire. I was standing in a moonlit grove 800 years in the past, watching as a woman who looked exactly like me knelt before a figure of impossible beauty. The moon goddess herself, radiant and terrible in her power, extending her hand to my ancestor. "You would be my children?" the goddess asked, her voice like silver bells in the wind. "We would," my ancestor replied. "We offer our loyalty, our service, our very souls to your light. Then receive my blessing, Elena Starborn. You and your bloodline shall be my voice among the wolves, my will made manifest in flesh. But know this, with great power comes great responsibility. You must ensure that my children never forget what they are, never lose themselves to the darkness that lurks in mortal hearts." Silver light poured from the goddess's hand, wrapping around my ancestor like liquid starlight. I could feel the change taking her, transforming her from human to something greater, something that could bridge the gap between mortal and divine. "Your bloodline shall be the guardians of this covenant," the goddess continued. "When the time comes that my children forget their purpose, when they choose power over wisdom, politics over compassion, then shall the ancient bloodline rise to restore the balance." The vision shifted, showing me glimpses of the centuries that followed. The formation of the first packs, the establishment of territorial laws, the gradual corruption of noble ideals into rigid bureaucracy. And through it all, the ancient bloodline waiting, watching, preserving the truth for the day it would be needed again. That day was now. I gasped as the vision released me, staggering back from the pedestal as the crystal's light faded. But the knowledge remained, burning in my mind like a brand. I wasn't just the heir to an old bloodline. I was the heir to a sacred trust, chosen by the moon goddess herself to restore what had been lost. Beautiful, isn't it? I spun around to find Damon standing in the vault entrance, his face a mask of pain and resignation. He looked older than when I'd seen him at Raven's Hollow, worn down by guilt and sleepless nights. "How long have you been there?" I asked, my hand instinctively moving to the crystal. "Long enough to see the vision. Long enough to understand what you really are." He stepped into the vault, moving slowly, so as not to spook me. "I've been waiting for you to come here." "Waiting for me?" "I knew you wouldn't surrender. I knew you'd try to find the truth about your heritage." His smile was bitter as winter. "I also knew that once you found it, everything would change." "It already has changed, Damon. The moment you chose the council over me, everything changed." "I know. And I know I can never take that back, can never undo the pain I caused you." He stopped just outside arm's reach, his ice blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "But I need you to know why I did it." "I don't care why."
Please.
"Just let me tell you the truth. The whole truth this time." Something in his tone made me pause. There was a desperation there I'd never heard before, a rawness that cut through my anger like a blade.
5 minutes, I said.
The night the council called for your exile, they didn't just tell me about your bloodline. They told me about mine. His voice was barely above a whisper. About what I really am. What do you mean? My great-great-grandfather wasn't just a powerful alpha, Kira. He was a revenant, like Matthias, but older, stronger, more corrupt. Damon's hands shook as he spoke. The council knew, had always known, but they needed his strength to maintain order. So they made a deal with him, power and position in exchange for loyal service. The revelation hit me like ice water. You're descended from a revenant, not just descended. The bloodline carries the curse. Every few generations, one of us starts to change, starts to develop the hunger for death magic. His laugh was hollow. Guess which generation that is? Damon. I've been fighting it for years. The urges, the whispers, the slow corruption of everything I touch. The council knows, they've been watching me, waiting to see if I'll fall like my ancestor did. His eyes met mine, and I saw the fear lurking there. That's why they wanted you gone, Kira. Not because of your bloodline, but because of mine. I don't understand. A mate bond with a Moonborn would have stabilized me, would have given me the strength to resist the curse permanently. But it also would have made me too powerful for them to control. His voice broke. So they gave me a choice: exile you and remain their puppet, or keep you and watch them destroy everything I've ever protected. The truth crashed over me like a tide. All this time, I'd thought he'd chosen politics over love. But he'd actually chosen my safety over his own salvation. You let me think you didn't want me, I whispered, because it was easier than telling you the truth. Easier than making you choose between your safety and my soul. Tears were streaming down his face now. I thought if you hated me, if you could move on and find happiness elsewhere, then at least one of us could be free. And the curse, getting stronger every day. I can feel it eating away at everything I am, everything I believe in. Soon, I'll be just another monster that needs to be put down. His smile was heartbreaking, but at least you'll be alive to see a better world. Damon, there has to be another way. There is. He gestured toward the crystal in my hands. You could claim your birthright. Take your place as the rightful ruler of the Northern Territories. With your ancient bloodline authority, you could rewrite the laws, break the corrupt systems that created this mess. And you would serve you loyally until the curse finally takes me, however long that might be. The offer hung between us like a lifeline, a chance to restore what we'd lost, to build something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Part of me wanted to take it, wanted to believe that love could conquer the darkness growing in his bloodline. But I'd learned something important over the past month. Love wasn't about saving someone else, it was about choosing to build something healthy together. I can't do it, I said softly. Pain flashed across his features. Can't or won't? Both. Damon, what you're offering isn't love, it's martyrdom. You want me to take on the responsibility of ruling an entire supernatural territory while watching you slowly die. You want me to spend every day fighting your curse, trying to hold onto pieces of a man who's already slipping away. I'm still me, Kira. I'm still the man who loves you. Are you? Because the man I fell in love with would never ask me to sacrifice my happiness for his peace of mind. I clutched the crystal tighter, drawing strength from its ancient power. The man I loved would want me to be happy, even if it meant being happy without him. I do want that, more than anything. Then let me go. Really let me go, this time. Stop trying to save me, stop trying to protect me, stop trying to control my choices, because you think you know what's best. I stepped closer, close enough to see the silver threads of corruption starting to web through his irises. Let me choose my own path, even if it's not the one that leads back to you. For a long moment, he just stared at me, wrestling with emotions I could feel echoing through our damaged bond. Then slowly he nodded. I release you, he said formally, using the ancient words that would sever our mate bond once and for all. I release you from all claims, all obligations. all ties that bind us. May the moon goddess bless your path, wherever it may lead. The golden thread that had connected us since our claiming ceremony snapped like an overstretched cable. The sensation was overwhelming, like losing a limb, but also like finally being able to breathe freely after years of suffocation. I was no longer Damon's mate. I was just Kira, free to choose my own destiny. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet." His smile was sad but genuine. "You still have to get out of here alive. And the council isn't going to just let you walk away with that crystal." As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Red light bathed the vault as security protocols activated, sealing the exits and summoning every guard in the territory. "You triggered the alarms," I realized, the moment I entered the vault. "I'm not exactly authorized to be here either." He drew his sword, the silver blade gleaming in the crimson light. "But I know another way out. The question is, do you trust me one last time?" The old Kira would have hesitated, would have let past hurts and broken promises paralyze her with indecision. But the new Kira, the Moonborn heir to an ancient bloodline, the woman who'd faced down revenants and council armies, she knew that sometimes you had to trust people to be better than they'd been before. "Lead the way," I said. He smiled, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I'd once loved underneath the corruption and curse. Then we were running, racing through passages that hadn't been used in centuries, the crystal's power guiding us toward freedom and the future I was finally ready to claim. Behind us, the council's forces gave chase. Ahead of us lay uncertainty, danger, and the promise of a new beginning. But for the first time since my exile, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward it. Chapter 10. The ancient amphitheater carved into the mountainside above Raven's Hollow had been built for moments like this, when the old laws demanded witness and the moon herself would serve as judge. 800 years ago, my ancestor had stood in this same sacred circle to receive the goddess's blessing. Tonight, I would stand here to claim what was rightfully mine. The entire supernatural community of the Northern Territories had gathered in response to my challenge. Word had spread like wildfire through the pack networks. The lost heir of the ancient bloodline had returned, bearing proof of her divine mandate and calling for a formal reckoning with the council's authority. Some had come as allies. The rogue packs that had suffered under council oppression filled the lower tiers, their eyes bright with hope for change. Several smaller territories had sent representatives, alphas who'd grown tired of bowing to corrupt bureaucrats who cared more about control than justice. Others had come as enemies. The remaining council members sat in positions of honor, surrounded by their guards and radiating the kind of cold fury that came from having their power challenged. Behind them, the alphas of the major territories watched with calculating eyes, ready to side with whoever emerged victorious. And scattered throughout the crowd were those who'd simply come to witness history, wolves from every pack, every bloodline, every corner of the supernatural world that had heard whispers of this night and knew it would change everything. I stood at the center of it all, the primordial record cradled in my hands like a star given physical form. The crystal pulsed with silver light that grew brighter as the full moon rose overhead, responding to the ancient power that flowed through my veins. "Kira Moonwhisper," Elder Cordelia called out, her voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater. "You stand accused of theft, treason, and crimes against supernatural order. How do you answer these charges?" "I answer them with the truth," I replied, my own voice enhanced by Moonborn power until it reached every ear in the gathering. "The truth about who I am, what you've done, and why your authority is a lie built on centuries of corruption. You are a rogue and a criminal. I am Elena Starborn's heir." I raised the crystal overhead, and its light exploded outward in waves that made every wolf present feel the weight of ancient magic. "I am the voice of the moon goddess among her children, and I call this council to judgment for their crimes against the very covenant that created our kind." Gasps echoed through the crowd as the crystal's power washed over them. Every wolf with even a trace of the old blood could feel it, the undeniable authenticity of my claim, the genetic markers that proved my lineage beyond any doubt. Impossible, another council member sputtered. The ancient bloodlines died out centuries ago. They went into hiding, I corrected, stepping forward so the moonlight caught the silver highlights in my hair. Driven underground by those who preferred politics to prophecy, who chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. I gestured to the crystal, and it projected the vision I'd experienced in the vault for all to see. The amphitheater filled with silver light as the gathered wolves witnessed the moment their kind had first received the moon's blessing, saw the covenant that was supposed to guide them, understood the sacred trust that had been betrayed. When the vision faded, the silence was deafening. "This is what you've forgotten," I said into that silence. "This is what the council has stolen from you. We were never meant to be ruled by fear, by rigid hierarchies, by those who would kill rather than lose control. We were meant to be guardians of the balance between mortal and divine, protectors of those who couldn't protect themselves." Pretty words, Cordelia said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. But words don't grant authority. The council rules by consensus of the packs. A consensus based on lies. I turned to address the crowd directly. How many of you have lost pack members to rogue enforcement? How many have watched loved ones disappear because they asked inconvenient questions? How many have lived in fear of speaking truth to power because you knew the cost would be exile or death? Murmurs rippled through the gathering as wolves exchanged meaningful glances. The council's reign of terror was an open secret, but no one had ever dared speak it aloud in such a public forum. The council has perverted everything the moon goddess intended, I continued. They've turned our sacred gifts into tools of oppression, our ancient laws into chains that bind the innocent while protecting the corrupt. They hunt down Moonborn wolves not because we're dangerous, but because we remember what they've tried to make you forget. Enough. Cordelia rose from her seat, power crackling around her like black lightning. You want to challenge our authority? Fine. But do it properly, according to the old laws you claim to champion. Gladly. I smiled, feeling the pieces of my plan finally falling into place. I invoke the right of divine challenge. Single combat between the accused and the accuser, with the moon goddess herself as witness and judge. The words sent another wave of shock through the crowd. The right of divine challenge was one of the oldest laws in the supernatural world, predating even the council's authority. It hadn't been invoked in over 2 centuries, but it was still valid, still binding. You would fight me yourself? Cordelia asked, clearly taken aback. I would fight your champion, according to tradition. Name your defender, and let the goddess decide who speaks truth. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across her features. Then her expression hardened with cruel satisfaction. Very well. Our champion will be me. The voice cut through the amphitheater like a blade, and every head turned toward its source. Damon stepped out of the crowd, his ice-blue eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I claim the right to serve as the council's champion, he said formally. Let the goddess judge between us. Damon, no. I breathed, but he was already walking toward the center of the circle. It has to be me, he said quietly as he drew near. You know it does. He was right, and I hated him for it. Of course the council would choose him as their champion, not just because he was one of the most powerful alphas in the territories, but because they knew fighting him would tear me apart emotionally. I won't hold back, I warned him. I'm counting on it. His smile was sad but determined. This is the only way to end it, Kira. The only way to break the cycle of corruption and give both of us the peace we deserve. There has to be another way. There isn't, and we both know it. He stepped back, giving me space as the ancient ritual demanded. Fight me with everything you have. Show them what a Moonborn can truly do when she's fighting for what's right. The crowd fell silent as we took our positions on opposite sides of the sacred circle. Above us, the full moon reached its zenith, bathing the amphitheater in silver light that made everything feel otherworldly. The challenge is accepted, Cordelia announced, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. Let the goddess witness this combat and judge who speaks truth. Begin. Damon shifted first, his human form dissolving into the massive black wolf that had once run beside mine through moonlit forests. But as his transformation completed, I saw the corruption more clearly, silver threads of revenant magic webbing through his fur, his eyes glowing with unnatural light. The curse was advancing faster than he'd admitted. I shifted in response, feeling my own wolf emerge with fluid grace. But this wasn't the simple beta wolf I'd been before my exile. Moonborn power flowed through every muscle, every nerve, transforming me into something that had never existed before, a perfect fusion of ancient magic and primal strength. We circled each other warily, two predators who knew each other's moves, each other's weaknesses. The crowd held its breath as centuries of tradition played out before their eyes. Then Damon lunged. We crashed together in the center of the circle, silver light meeting shadow magic in an explosion that lit up the entire mountainside. His claws raked across my ribs, but my enhanced healing closed the wounds almost instantly. My teeth found his shoulder, but the revenant corruption made his flesh cold and bitter against my tongue. We separated, circled, clashed again. Each exchange was a conversation in violence, his desperate need for redemption meeting my fierce determination to protect everything I'd built. We were perfectly matched in skill, but I had advantages he couldn't counter. The moonlight made me stronger with every passing moment, while the revenant curse drained his life force to fuel its dark magic. I could outlast him, could wear him down until he collapsed from the corruption eating him alive. But I could also see the truth in his eyes. He didn't want to win this fight. He wanted me to end his suffering. "Don't you dare," I snarled as we broke apart again, both of us bloodied and exhausted. "Don't you dare use me as your suicide weapon." "It's not suicide," he panted, silver blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "It's justice. It's the only way to free both of us from what we've become. I'm not going to kill you, Damon. Then you'll lose. And everything you've fought for dies with you." He was right, and we both knew it. The corruption was advancing by the moment, turning him into something monstrous. Soon, he wouldn't be Damon anymore. He'd be just another revenant that needed to be put down for everyone's safety. But I'd found another way. Instead of attacking him, I reached out with my Moonborn abilities and grasped the silver threads of corruption that wound through his essence. Revenant magic was powerful, but it was also parasitic. It needed a host to survive. What if I could give it a different host? "What are you doing?" he gasped as silver light began pouring from my hands. "Something stupid and dangerous and probably impossible," I replied, pouring every ounce of power I possessed into the attempt. "I'm going to draw the curse into myself." "Kira, no. The corruption will kill you." "Maybe. Or maybe Moonborn power is strong enough to burn it away." I gritted my teeth as the first tendrils of dark magic entered my system, feeling like ice in my veins. "Either way, you don't get to die for my redemption." The battle became internal as I fought to contain the revenant curse within my own spiritual matrix. It was like swallowing poison and trying to digest it, like holding fire and refusing to let it burn. Every instinct screamed at me to let it go, to push the corruption back where it came from. But I held on. I held on because I'd finally learned what love really meant. Not possession, not sacrifice, but the willingness to fight for someone's chance at happiness even when it cost you everything. The curse fought me every step of the way, trying to corrupt my power the way it had corrupted Damon's. But Moonborn magic was older, purer, connected directly to the divine source that had created it. Slowly, inevitably, the silver fire began to burn away the shadows. When it was over, I collapsed to my knees in human form, every ounce of energy drained from my body. But across the circle, Damon was changing too. The silver threads were gone, his eyes clear and human once more. "The curse," he whispered in wonder. "It's gone." "Yeah, well, I managed weakly. Don't expect me to make a habit of it." The crowd erupted in cheers as they realized what they'd witnessed, not just a victory in combat, but a miracle of redemption. Even the council members looked stunned by what had transpired. "The challenge is decided," Cordelia said, her voice hollow with defeat. The goddess has clearly chosen her champion. Has she? I struggled to my feet, accepting Asher's steadying hand as he appeared at my side. Because I don't think this was about choosing champions at all. I turned to address the crowd, drawing on reserves of strength I didn't know I possessed. The goddess didn't send me here to defeat the council through violence, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater. She sent me to remind all of us what we're supposed to be. We are her children, blessed with gifts that are meant to protect and heal, not dominate and destroy. I gestured to Damon, who was slowly rising to his feet with wonder still written across his features. Even the deepest corruption can be cleansed when we choose compassion over vengeance. Even the most broken bonds can be healed when we choose love over fear. I looked directly at the council members. The question is, what do you choose? Cordelia stared at me for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, she knelt. I choose to serve the goddess's will, she said formally. I choose to follow the ancient bloodline's guidance. One by one, the other council members followed suit. Then the territorial alphas, then the pack representatives, until every wolf in the amphitheater was kneeling before the heir they'd never known they needed. Rise, I said gently. All of you, rise. We kneel only to the goddess herself, not to each other. From this day forward, we stand as equals in her light. As the crowd rose to their feet, I felt the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders. Not the crushing burden I'd expected, but something lighter, the satisfaction of finally understanding my purpose. I was going to change everything. But first I had some personal business to attend to. Chapter 11. 3 months after the reckoning, I stood in the rebuilt Great Hall of Raven's Hollow, watching representatives from every pack in the Northern Territories work together to draft new laws that would govern our kind for generations to come. The scene would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. Territorial alphas sharing meals with former rogues, council elders taking notes from young wolves with fresh perspectives, ancient enemies finding common ground in their shared desire for justice. Change, I'd learned, was messy, complicated, and absolutely exhausting. The Yukon Pack is still refusing to acknowledge the new territorial redistribution, Luna reported, settling into the chair beside my makeshift desk. Her violet eyes held the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from mediating disputes between stubborn wolves for weeks on end. Alpha Morrison says he won't give up hunting rights to lands his family has held for 2 centuries. And the displaced rogues who've been living on those lands for the past 50 years? I asked, not looking up from the stack of petitions awaiting my review. What about their rights? That's what I told him. He suggested we find them somewhere else to live. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar headache that accompanied every session of supernatural politics. Schedule a meeting with Morrison for next week. And invite representatives from the affected rogue communities. Maybe if he has to look them in the eye while he explains why his hunting rights matter more than their homes, he'll reconsider. And if he doesn't, then we'll remind him that territorial claims are now subject to review by the new council. Ancient holdings aren't automatic anymore. They have to be justified by need and stewardship, not just tradition. Luna made a note on her ever-present tablet. Speaking of the new council, we still need to finalize the selection process for the remaining seats. I sighed, pushing the petitions aside for the moment. When I'd accepted the role of High Alpha, a position that hadn't existed since the ancient bloodlines went into hiding, I'd insisted on restructuring the entire governmental system. Instead of 5 elders holding absolute power, the new council would have 12 representatives, for elected by the major territorial packs, for chosen by the smaller communities and rogue settlements, and 4 appointed by me to represent specialized interests like healers, scholars, and peacekeepers. It was a more democratic system, designed to give voice to wolves who'd been marginalized under the old regime. It was also incredibly complicated to implement. The territorial representatives are easy enough. They're holding elections next month, I said. And the smaller communities have already submitted their nominees. It's the specialist positions that are proving challenging. Any luck finding someone willing to serve as healer representative? I smiled despite my exhaustion. Actually, yes. Dr. Sarah Chen from the Vancouver territory has agreed to the position. She's been running supernatural-friendly medical clinics throughout the Pacific Northwest, and her work with injured rogues has been groundbreaking. Good choice. What about the scholar position? Still working on that one. Most of the academics are too afraid of political backlash to accept. I stretched, feeling the knots in my shoulders protest. Turns out centuries of persecution make intellectuals reluctant to step into the public eye. Can't imagine why, Luna said dryly. Before I could respond, a soft knock interrupted us. Asher appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with tea and what looked like actual food, something I'd been forgetting to consume with alarming regularity. Break time, he announced, setting the tray down with the kind of gentle authority I'd learned not to argue with. You've been at this for 8 hours straight. There's too much to do, I protested, even as the smell of fresh bread made my stomach rumble traitorously. There's always too much to do. That's why delegation exists. He perched on the edge of my desk, his dark eyes holding the mixture of concern and affection that had become wonderfully familiar. When's the last time you took a real break? And I mean a break that didn't involve reading reports or mediating disputes. I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I couldn't remember. The weeks since the reckoning had blurred together in a constant stream of meetings, negotiations, and the thousand small crises that came with rebuilding an entire governmental system from the ground up. Exactly my point, Asher said, reading the confusion on my face. Luna, can you handle things for a couple hours? Of course. But where are you taking her? Somewhere she can remember why she chose this path in the first place. An hour later, I found myself standing at the edge of a moonlit lake deep in nightfall territory, the first moment of true peace I'd experienced in months. The water reflected the stars like scattered diamonds, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant call of a night bird. Better? Asher asked, settling beside me on the soft grass. Much. I leaned against his shoulder, feeling the tension slowly drain from my muscles. How did you know I needed this? Because I know you. And because I've watched you slowly disappearing under the weight of everyone else's expectations over the past 3 months. His words hit uncomfortably close to home. I'm not disappearing. I'm just busy. You're burning yourself out trying to be everything to everyone. There's a difference. I wanted to argue, but the truth was I'd been feeling increasingly disconnected from myself lately. The woman who'd faced down revenants and council armies seemed like a stranger compared to the exhausted bureaucrat I'd become. I don't know how to do this, I admitted quietly. How to be a leader without losing myself in the process. You learn. Same as everyone else who's ever tried to change the world. His arm tightened around me. But you don't have to learn it alone. Don't I? Everyone looks to me for answers, Asher. Every decision, every policy, every crisis, they all expect me to know exactly what to do. And most of the time, I'm just making educated guesses and hoping for the best. Good. That means you're still human. I laughed despite myself. I'm not sure that's as comforting as you meant it to be. It should be. The moment you start thinking you have all the answers is the moment you become just another tyrant. He turned to face me fully. You want to know what I see when I look at you? What? I see someone who's been carrying the weight of an entire species on her shoulders for 3 months and still worries more about other people's well-being than her own. I see someone who could have claimed absolute power, but chose to share it instead. I see someone who breaks curses instead of necks, who builds instead of destroys. His words warmed something deep in my chest that had been cold for too long. And what else do you see? I see the woman I fell in love with. The one who's still in there, under all the responsibility and stress. His hand cupped my cheek gently. The one who deserves to be happy, not just successful. Happiness feels like a luxury I can't afford right now. Happiness isn't a luxury, Kira. It's fuel. How long do you think you can keep giving pieces of yourself away if you never take time to replenish what you've lost? He was right as usual. I'd been so focused on fixing everything that was broken in the supernatural world that I'd started breaking myself in the process. What do you suggest? I asked. that you start by trusting the people you've chosen to help you. Luna's brilliant, the new council members are competent, and most of the territorial disputes will sort themselves out given time. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. You don't have to solve every problem personally. But what if I make the wrong choice? What if I delegate something important and it goes badly? Then you'll deal with the consequences and make a better choice next time. That's how learning works. And what if people get hurt because of my mistakes? People are getting hurt right now because you're trying to do everything yourself and burning out in the process. His voice was gentle but firm. Perfect leadership is a myth, Kira. Good leadership is about making the best decisions you can with the information you have, surrounding yourself with people you trust, and being willing to adapt when circumstances change. I considered his words as we sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon's reflection dance on the water. He was right. I had been trying to be perfect, to prove that I deserved the power that had been thrust upon me. But perfection was impossible, and the attempt was slowly killing me. There's something else, I said eventually. What? I've been avoiding making a decision about us. About what we are, what we could be. I turned to meet his eyes. I've been afraid that if I let myself be happy with you, it means I'm betraying everything I went through with Damon. Are you? Betraying it, I mean?
No.
I don't think so. What Damon and I had was real, but it was also built on a foundation that couldn't support the weight of who we really were. The mate bond, the pack politics, the expectations, none of it left room for us to just be ourselves. And what about us? What are we built on? I thought about it, really considered the question.
Choice.
Friendship. The kind of love that grows slowly instead of striking like lightning. I smiled. The kind that makes me better instead of just making me feel complete. Is that enough? For someone who's destined for greatness, who could probably have any alpha in the Northern Territories. More than enough. I shifted to face him fully. Because you see me, Asher. Not the Moonborn heir, or the high alpha or the woman who broke ancient curses. You see Kira and you love her exactly as she is. I do love her. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Good. Because she loves you too. And she's tired of pretending that politics and duty are more important than the chance to build something beautiful with someone who actually understands her. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the moonlight. Are you sure? Because once we do this, once we make it official, there's no going back. You'll be bound to someone who is exiled from his own pack, who has no political connections or territorial holdings to offer you. I don't want political connections. I want a partner who'll tell me when I'm being an idiot, who'll make me take breaks when I forget to eat, who'll remind me that saving the world doesn't mean sacrificing my own happiness. I can do that. I know you can. The question is, do you want to? Because being with me means being with someone who's going to spend the rest of her life in the public eye, making decisions that affect thousands of wolves. It means never having a quiet, simple life. Quiet and simple are overrated. His smile was soft and sure. Besides, I fell in love with a woman who is destined to change the world. Why would I want her to be anything less than extraordinary? Then it settled. I reached up to cup his face in my hands. Asher Nightfall, will you be my mate? Not because fate demands it, not because politics require it, but because we choose each other freely and completely. Yes. The word was barely a whisper against my lips. Yes, absolutely yes. When he kissed me this time, it wasn't tentative or questioning. It was a promise, a claim, a celebration of everything we'd been through and everything we were about to become. It tasted like hope and moonlight and the kind of love that could weather any storm. When we finally broke apart, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because my responsibilities had changed, but because I finally had someone to share them with, someone who'd chosen to stand beside me not out of duty or obligation, but out of love. So, what happens now? I asked. Now we go back and change the world together. His grin was infectious. But first, we finish this break. Because I have a feeling it's going to be a while before we get another chance for peace and quiet. I laughed, feeling more like myself than I had since the reckoning.
Deal.
but only if you promise to keep reminding me to take breaks. For the rest of our lives, if you'll let me. I'm counting on it. We sat by the lake until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, planning the future, and simply enjoying the present. And for the first time since I'd accepted the role of High Alpha, I felt like I could actually do this, not just survive the responsibility, but thrive in it. Because I wasn't doing it alone anymore. Chapter 12, 1 year later. The full moon hung like a silver coin above the sacred grove where it all began, casting everything in the kind of ethereal light that made magic feel possible. Tonight marked the first anniversary of the reckoning, and wolves from across the northern territories had gathered to celebrate not just that victory, but everything that had grown from it. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the festivities with a mixture of pride and wonder. Children who'd been born into rogue camps were playing alongside the cubs of territorial alphas, their laughter creating a symphony of joy that would have been impossible under the old system. Elders who'd spent decades in hiding were sharing stories with young wolves eager to learn about their heritage. Former enemies were sharing meals and discovering common ground. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was beautiful in its imperfection. Admiring your handiwork. Asher's voice came from behind me, warm with affection and gentle teasing. I leaned back against his chest, feeling his arms wrap around me with the comfortable intimacy of a year spent learning each other's rhythms. Our handiwork, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Maybe not, but you're the one who had the courage to start it. Around us, the celebration continued in full swing. The new council had organized tonight's gathering as both commemoration and progress report, a chance for all the territories to see how far they'd come and discuss where they wanted to go next. The changes had been remarkable. The Rogue Settlement Initiative had successfully integrated over 300 displaced wolves into established territories. The new healing centers had reduced supernatural-related deaths by 40%. The educational exchange program was fostering understanding between communities that had been isolated for generations. Most importantly, the supernatural world had seen the awakening of 6 new Moonborn wolves in the past year, young people whose abilities might have been suppressed or feared under the old regime, but who were now being trained and celebrated as the gifts they truly were. "Luna's looking for you," Asher said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Something about the midnight ceremony. I turned in his arms, studying his face in the moonlight. Even after a year, he still took my breath away, not just because he was devastatingly handsome, but because of the way he looked at me. Like I was extraordinary without being untouchable, powerful without being intimidating. "What midnight ceremony?" I asked suspiciously. His smile was pure mischief. "The one where we make our bond official in front of the goddess and everyone who matters to us." My heart stopped. "Asher, are you proposing?" "Absolutely." He stepped back and dropped to one knee, pulling a ring from his pocket that made me gasp. It wasn't traditional gold or platinum, but silver wrapped around a moonstone that seemed to hold captured starlight. "Kira Moonwhisper, High Alpha of the Northern Territories, heir to the ancient bloodlines, and the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" "You already know the answer to that," I said, tears blurring my vision as he slipped the ring onto my finger.
Yes.
"Yes, of course yes." The crowd around us erupted in cheers as word spread of our engagement. Within moments, we were surrounded by well-wishers, pack members, and friends who'd become family. Luna appeared with tears in her violet eyes. My mother emerged from the crowd to embrace us both, and even some of the more formal council members looked genuinely pleased. But it was the figure standing at the edge of the circle who caught my attention, Damon, watching the celebration with a mixture of joy and bittersweet acceptance. "Excuse me for a moment," I told Asher, squeezing his hand before making my way through the crowd. Damon met me halfway, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Two people who'd shared everything and lost it all, who'd found their way to a kind of peace that might not have been possible without the journey they'd taken. "Congratulations," he said, and his smile was genuine. "I'm happy for you. Both of you." "Thank you. How are you doing?" "Really?" He considered the question seriously. "Better. Different. The curse is gone, but it took pieces of me with it that I'm still learning to live without. He gestured toward a young woman standing near the food tables, petite, dark-haired, with a kind of quiet strength that reminded me of a forest stream. Sarah's been helping me remember who I was before the corruption. Sarah? Dr. Chen. Your new healer representative. His smile turned fond. We've been working together on a project to help other wolves who've been affected by dark magic. Turns out we have more in common than either of us expected. I studied the way he looked at the other woman and felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It wasn't the desperate, all-consuming fire he'd felt for me, but something steadier, healthier. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. You deserve happiness, Damon. Real happiness, not the kind that comes with conditions and complications. So do you. And from what I can see, you found it. I have. I glanced back at Asher, who was telling some elaborate story to a group of fascinated children. It's different from what we had. Quieter in some ways, but stronger.
Good.
That's all I ever really wanted for you. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration swirl around us. Then Luna's voice cut through the noise, calling for attention. Friends, family, packmates, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the grove. It's time for the midnight ceremony. The crowd gathered in a circle around the ancient altar where my ancestor had first received the moon goddess's blessing. Luna began the ritual with words in the old tongue, calling upon the divine witness that would sanctify our union. But as Asher and I stepped forward to take our places, something unexpected happened. The moonlight streaming through the trees began to intensify, growing brighter and more focused until it formed a column of pure silver radiance around the altar. The crowd gasped and fell to their knees as a figure began to materialize within the light, tall, ethereal, radiating the kind of power that made every wolf present feel the truth of their divine heritage. The moon goddess herself had come to witness our ceremony. My children, she said, her voice like silver bells and mountain winds, you have done well. The covenant has been restored, the balance preserved, the future secured. I tried to speak, to thank her for the blessing of our union, but she raised a hand for silence. This is not just a marriage ceremony, she continued, her ancient eyes holding mine with infinite compassion. This is the beginning of a new age. Kira Starborn, for that is your true name, you have proven yourself worthy of the trust placed in your bloodline. And Asher Nightfall, you have shown that love freely chosen is stronger than any bond of fate. She gestured, and more light poured down from the heavens, wrapping around us like liquid starlight. I bless this union not just with happiness, but with purpose. Your children will carry the gifts of both bloodlines, ancient authority and nightfall wisdom. They will bridge the old world and the new, ensuring that what you have built endures for generations yet to come. The light pulsed once, twice, then faded, leaving the grove in normal moonlight. The goddess was gone, but her blessing remained. I could feel it singing in my veins, a promise of the future we would build together. Well, Asher said quietly, that's not something you see every day. I laughed, feeling giddy with joy and divine favor and the sheer impossibility of my life. Nothing about us has ever been normal. Why start now? Good point. He took my hands, his dark eyes serious despite his smile. Ready to make this official? More than ready. Luna completed the ceremony with words both ancient and new, binding us not just as mates, but as partners in every sense of the word. When we kissed to seal our vows, the assembled crowd erupted in howls of celebration that echoed across the mountains. Later, as the formal festivities wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Asher and I found ourselves alone in the grove where I'd first felt the bite of rejection over a year ago. The contrast wasn't lost on either of us. Any regrets? He asked, pulling me close. About what?
This. Us.
The path that led us here. His expression grew serious. I know it hasn't been easy, becoming a public figure, taking on responsibilities that would crush most people. Sometimes I wonder if you might have been happier with a simpler life. I considered his question, looking around the sacred grove that had seen so much pain and triumph. Do you know what I regret? What? That it took heartbreak to teach me who I really was. That I wasted so many years trying to be small and acceptable instead of embracing what made me different. I turned to face him fully. But I don't regret a single step that led me to you. Even the painful ones? Especially the painful ones. Because without them, I would never have learned that love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. And have you completed yourself? I thought about the question seriously. The woman who'd been exiled from Silvermoon territory bore little resemblance to the high alpha who now stood in this grove. She'd been broken, desperate, clinging to others for validation and purpose. I was whole, confident, secure in my power and my choices. I'm getting there, I said finally. And I have the rest of our lives to figure out the rest. Good answer. He spun me around, making me laugh as my formal robes swirled in the moonlight. So, what's next for the High Alpha and her consort? Well, there's the Territorial Summit next month, the new Moonborn training facility to establish, 3 different trade disputes to mediate. I trailed off, seeing his expression. But none of that matters tonight. What matters tonight? Tonight, we celebrate. We dance under the stars. We make plans for our future, and we remember that even people destined to change the world deserve moments of pure happiness. I like that plan. As if summoned by our words, music began to drift from the main celebration, not the formal ceremonial songs, but the kind of joyful, spontaneous melodies that spoke of community and belonging. Asher extended his hand with theatrical formality. May I have this dance, High Alpha? Always, I replied, taking his hand. For as long as the moon shines and the stars sing, always. We danced in the sacred grove until dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold, 2 souls who'd found their home in each other's arms. Around us, the ancient trees stood witness to promises made and futures claimed, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, not in sorrow or challenge, but in pure joy. The sound was answered by another, then another, until the entire mountain range echoed with the song of a people finally free to be everything they were meant to be. I was no longer the rejected mate, the broken exile, the woman who'd lost everything and had to build herself anew. I was Kira Starborn, heir to ancient power and architect of a better future. I was Asher's chosen mate and partner in all things. I was exactly who I was meant to be. And this was just the beginning.
The end.